Oh, hang on a minute. My cat's trying to kill the hamster.
Hello everybody and welcome to Nothing and Like It, the only podcast that chronicles the UK's Frontier Wrestling Alliance via its appearances on television. Who am I? I am Kieran Lefort, and joining me as always, our Mr. Nice Guy, Eddie Sideburns. How are you doing, Eddie?
I am over the moon. You know how that, like, when Gabrielle sings dreams can come true, like this episode is dreams come true for me because of who we've got. So excited, cannot wait to pick his brain and find all about FWA in his career. So yes, let's go.
Tremendous. And of course, our drunken master, Andy Ogden. Andy, how's you?
I'm not bad. I've got the face like Alan Brazil currently here in Costa del Rochdale, like a beacon. So yeah, I'm doing fine, mate.
Now, if you have clicked on this thumbnail or read the description, you already know what this is. But because I came up with this torturous joke, I'm going to see it through to the end. At the end of the last episode, I promised that we'd be going back to regular programming, so I gathered the lads and we were all set to resume FWA on TV on the wrestling channel, and a little voice in my head went, "Come on, Kieran, you can do better than that." So please join me in welcoming Revolution Pro Wrestling's owner and promoter, and more importantly for our purposes, former FWA referee, Andy Quildan. Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, but I am slightly disappointed because I was hoping that that we'd get the FWA music, because I know we start the podcast with the FWA music, and I was thinking it'd get me pumped. But
sorry,
I don't want to pull the curtain back too much. But we've just gone straight into this with no music. So here we are.
Sorry, that's the marvels of post production, I'm afraid.
Can we not restart it and get the ukulele version on again for him?
1, 2, 3, 4. FWA, 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 FWA.
All right, that's enough of that. So we obviously mostly want to concentrate on the period of FWA we're covering, which is like 2001 through like early 2005, I think, is when we're going to press the eject button. But I've got to ask, what sparked your interest in wrestling in the first place?
Well, I actually think, when I think about it, it's kind of hard to put my finger on it, because I was so young when I got involved in my love affair with professional wrestling. But I'm guessing it's because of all the things that attract a kid to anything, you know. Mm-hmm. As a father of a young boy myself, like, you just know, like, kids are just attracted towards, it's almost like flies, isn't it? You're attracted to those bright lights. You know, yeah. And I feel like it was just everything about it jumped out to me. It was the loud noises, the music, the larger than life characters. It was like seeing superheroes or cartoon characters come to life. And obviously that was I guess around the early 90s, 1990, 1991 would have been kind of a time I first kind of got into it. And when you look at the WWE products then and what it was tailored towards my childhood, everything about
exactly
it.
That, yeah.
Yeah. And I say over the years, I've kind of, wrestling seemed to grow up with me, because when I went through those awkward teenage years, that was the Attitude Era, you know. So yeah, it's just always been a part of my life. But honestly, I was just captivated. Like I said, I can't put my finger on one specific thing, but I was captivated about it, just from the second that I kind of laid my eyes on it, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And everyone thought I'd grow out of it, and it's just got worse.
So we've seen you pop up in the crowd, or more specifically in the back of a Drew McDonald promo in the 2001 tapings. When was your first FWA show, and when did you start going regularly?
It may have been that show, because I want to say, would this be the Harrow High School show?
That's a Harrow show, yeah.
Yeah. So Harrow High School was my first FWA show.
Right.
So a little bit before then, I started dabbling with British wrestling. Now, my family was always very poor, and we couldn't afford to go to WWE. And I always tell this story, and I don't want to say it over and over again, but I'm going to say it again anyway because it'll hopefully give some sympathy towards me here. But when I was younger, so I want to say it was 1993. So obviously we going to Wembley Stadium wasn't even in the equation because we were so poor. But like 1993, I actually won tickets to go and see WWE. I want to say at Earl's Court. So for that tour that following summer through WWF magazine. And I was so excited because I won tickets. I won a pair of tickets, and my family couldn't afford the train fare for us to go and watch the show. So being able to see professional wrestling live for me was always a bit of a pipe dream. It was always like, wow, this is, it just felt so far away from what I could even imagine. And then I guess when British wrestling popped up, like reading the local paper, and I want to say, like, we saw an advert, and the Bushwhackers were on the show that I went to, the first one, and it said the Rock and Roll Express, and I was like,
I think I know which Rock and Roll Express this is going to be.
Yeah, so we got Blondie Barrett, not Ricky and Robert. So, but like it's funny because I always tell. I did a week on the camps with Blondie Barrett, and I told him that story. And just to, just kind of put some context towards me and FWA. I just remember, obviously, with the British wrestling shows, it was always a that will do attitude. The ring looked like it was about to fall down at any second. There's some of the shows I used to go and see where the ring was on a stage. And every time someone hit the ropes, it would edge closer and closer to the edge of the stage. It never fell off, but it came close on many different occasions. And Blondie Barrett, in one specific show, he was doing a double. He was also portraying Dunk the Clown on that specific show. And it's crazy because look, I'm going all over the place, but I was so in love with wrestling. I just wanted to be around wrestling. I knew it was crap, right? But I just wanted to be around it, right? So I've got pictures with Dunk the Clown and Tiny Tom Thumb and you name it. I've got a picture with them, and Blondie Barrett did a run-in on one of these shows, and I just remember he had like a wooden coat hanger. It was literally a coat hanger, and he was hitting people with his coat hanger like it was I don't know, Big Boss Man's nightstick or something, right? and I just remember telling him about it, and he had a right old laugh about it. But that summed up British wrestling for me, and it was always like, next time we come back, we're going to have a street fight. And it's like, yes, Robbie Brookside, Drew McDonald, street fight. You go back, Robbie and Drew are nowhere to be seen, right?
This is like the third time I've heard this very similar story in like the space of a month. That really was British wrestling at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so you've got to imagine, I go from that to then going to my first FWA show. So as I was getting a bit older, I was kind of getting a bit more trusted, and I started to go. So I started going to, obviously started off going to the shows locally to me, and then from that point, I started going to the show. I was in Southend in Essex, and then I'd start going to a bit further out. So I'd get the C2C line. We'd go to Barking, we'd go to Dagenham, Croydon. Start to go a little bit further out. The only way there was no internet really at the time, so the only way you'd find out about the show, I mean, there was the internet, but it was not like it is now. You guys know, like, it's just it was BraveNet forums. It was before the UK Fan Forum had passwords and usernames and all of that, and you'd find out about the shows. They'd put a list of dates in the program, and it'd just be printed on an A4 piece of paper, and it'd be like, this date we're in Barking, this date we're in Basildon, this date we're in Southend, and you just look at it and try and figure out what shows you could get to. And then I made friends. It seems to be the case of wrestling. You just kind of, if you go to enough shows, you kind of start bumping into some familiar faces. And I'll say some names. So like the type of people that I kind of bumped into would be like an Adam Mumford, who he wound up running a promotion called Revolution British Wrestling. I didn't steal the name from him, but that's and he ran a wrestling news site at the time. I can't remember what it was called, but he ran like again, like I say, wrestling news site. It was like it was a news board, which was like it was almost like a forum. I don't know, but so there was him, Dan Ambrose, who he played an important part in my journey, and and someone who like I'm still very good friends with to this day, who's now started helping out with RevPro, Craig Armand, who I actually wound up going to uni with and living with as a result of these FWA shows. So
amazing.
So we became friends with all of these, and then they were like, "Oh, you should come to FWA." And I think it was Adam Mumford in particular who was pushing FWA, saying, "You know, this isn't like these shows. You should come to FWA." And we went to a Harrow High School show, and the thing that stood out instantly was the entrance music. Everyone had their own themes. It was the fact that there was storylines. It was like the new school versus old school storyline. And it was the fact that, well, I later found out it was obviously the trainees who were the most infused people within the crowd, but it didn't matter because they gave everyone else in the crowd the energy, right? But the crowd knew who all the wrestlers were, and the crowd knew all the wrestlers' catchphrases, you know? And just from that moment, I was like, this is what professional wrestling can be. There's actual production, there's actual storylines. And I know that when I go to this show, when I go to the next show, the stories are going to follow through. And obviously that was in the infancy of the internet. And then they started doing stories on the internet, and you could follow stuff on the internet as well. So yeah, my love of FWA just spiraled from there. And it was almost, it just showed me, and it did show me several times over the years the potential of what British wrestling could be, and I'd never seen anything like it. For me, it was like the closest thing to ECW that we'd seen, and it was. I just don't think people understand how revolutionary it was at the time, because you know there was no one setting the example. There was no one leading the way for them to do that in the UK. Obviously, the more and more I got involved, the more I realised so much of it was luck rather than judgment.
It was a lot of toothpicks and rubber bands holding it together. And once you got, you know, beneath the surface, wasn't it?
Yeah, but
fans didn't know that.
And they absolutely didn't, and that was almost part of the charm of it, and that was almost why.
But then so's ECW,
special.
Right? What was that held together with? Heyman's dreams for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. So so there's parallels in more ways than one. But it was just, like I say, it was just such an eye-opening experience for me.
So the first time I think we saw you on TV as a ref was March 28th, 2004 in Newport. Was that actually your first show as the ref, or had you done Academy, and did you do any of the breakout tour or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'd done Academy. So Dan Ambrose actually did some training with FWA. Right. And he hurt his knee, a great advert for the training school. He hurt his knee pretty badly. And he was unable to kind of continue his dream of wrestling. And Dan at the time was very good friends with Max Voltage. Who's, you know, famous for the wrestling. And I'd love to give it another plug of what he's calling the Hammersmith show, but I can't remember what name he's calling it. They got a new name, but comedians and wrestlers. But Max Voltage became a very, very good friend of mine through Dan as well. And Dan was basically like, well, you know, I can't wrestle anymore, but I'm interested in becoming a referee. And FWA are running this referee training course. And basically one thing about FWA is if there was anything that could be monetized in any way, shape or form, they were on it, right? So there was this referee training course in Portsmouth, and which I guess is kind of shaped everything about me because I live in Portsmouth now. But so we went to this training course, we paid our money to go to a training course, and it was like the winning person gets a referee shirt and gets the opportunity to referee an FWA Academy show. Free of charge. You've got to pay your own expenses, etc., right?
Yeah, please read the small print. Yeah.
So I remember I was a bit of a drama kid at the time, and until my I feel like I'm just getting all my jabs in here because we're talking about this time of my life. But until my drama teacher, Mrs. Smith, in case you're listening, destroyed my passion for theatre. But like I had the opportunity to obviously referee on this show because I was the best referee of the bunch, right? Dan was number 2, but I was number 1 because I got the shirt, right? So
you got 2 fully functional knees. That's why you
right, absolutely. Well, there you go. Yeah, I wasn't going in with a handicap. And then so when I realised that this, like, when wrestling started just messing my life up entirely, was that first show. So I was actually, at the time, I was doing a production of West Side Story, and it was with the school, right? And I was in the production, and it was like the Friday, Saturday, Sunday we were doing shows. And of course, this FWA Academy show was on the Saturday, I believe. or not even the Sunday. I don't know. It was one of the days the FWA Academy show fell on was this show. And then I was just like, there's no way I can get out of this show. But my mum was so supportive of everything that I ever wanted to achieve and do. And she just made me believe I could do anything. So I kind of told the school, I can't do this. And they went crazy at me. And they're like, we're going to call your mum and whatever. And my mum stood by me. And I never said any of this to FWA Academy. And I didn't even realize at the time that probably they would have just been like, yeah, you can do next month. But I always wonder, if I didn't do that, then I always wonder if my journey would have been the same, if I would have got on, or if they would have just been like, here's just another unreliable one, on to the next person to work for free. So then I just started refereeing these FWA Academy shows. And then after the FWA Academy shows, obviously I started gravitating towards the main FWA shows. But there was always a thing with me whereby, because I looked very young, I was blessed with boyish good looks. And unfortunately, somewhere along the line, age caught up with me. But I always remember Alex saying, like, and I have to look. I'm sure we're going to talk about Alex a lot in this thing.
Yeah.
But I was absolutely starstruck by Alex. Like, there's not many people who've got a presence like him and who can talk like him. And as a result, anytime I was kind of around him, I was kind of intimidated by him. So I found it hard to almost get my words out and kind of explain my passion and what I could bring to the table, etc. And as a result, I feel like I never really did myself any solids. But Alex would always be like, I think you look too young. I don't know if we can put you on these shows yet because you look too young.
It's kind of what we've said. It's like all the FWA referees look like pub landlords, apart from you, who look like you would be ID'd immediately if you went into any of their pubs.
Right.
Like, were you 18?
And believe me, I was. So I think I was 18 when I started on the main shows, maybe 17.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
But I think I would have been about when I first started, I was 15. And then when I got into the main shows, look, I remember I might have been 17 because I remember my 18th birthday was on one of the tours which had D'Lo Brown on it. It was in the Morecambe Dome. That was the day I turned 18. I was in the Morecambe Dome with D'Lo Brown, and Fozzie was the person who bought me my first legal pint. So so that was. So again, like I say, FWA has just been a part of everything. It's insane.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I guess like kind of Newport may well have been my first one. It was definitely the first one where I refereed. I think I refereed every single match on the show, but I think that was more down to not because they wanted me to referee every match on the show. I just didn't think they had the foresight to book another referee.
It's another wage they don't have to pay, isn't it? Right.
Right. But I remember Mark Sloan called me up and was like, do you want to come to Newport? Like, come and, just come and kind of get involved and whatever. And it was crazy because you look at that show, it was like CM Punk and Doug Williams on the show. I'm almost certain it wasn't my first show because I got told off on that show in the middle of a match.
Oh, really?
Can you guess what match?
Is it CM Punk and Doug Williams? Because CM Punk seems like the kind of guy who'd tell you off in the middle of a match.
No, it wasn't actually. They were quite complimentary of me. It was Alex Shane. Shane told me off. He called me a fucking idiot in the middle of the match. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, I'm just doing everything that you've asked me to do, but he wasn't. I don't know if he wasn't happy with the crowd reaction or what. I don't know, but like, but it was specific referee spots, where you're not supposed to catch him holding the ropes, and then you do catch him and whatever. And I was doing every, like, to this day, it always racks my brain. Like, what did I do wrong to make him so angry, right?
Yeah.
But it's funny because then after that, like, Alex kind of took a liking to me, and then I would become like Alex's referee. So like, when Alex did his, he did the Mercedes Monet before Mercedes Monet, where he was going around winning all the championships from all the different promotions. And when he was doing that, like, I was his referee. So I was, I'd just be in the car with him for hours and hours. And that's
you're part of the package.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He was like, you've got to book my referee, and fair play to him. He always got me paid. He always got me paid a lot better than I got paid at FWA. So that was that was good, and that's where I got to know Alex more, learn more about FWA. And that's also how I wound up refereeing the beginning Wigan, which obviously comes up every now and again. I know it's not associated with FWA.
Oh, was that you? So, to this day, I have still never seen that match.
Oh, you've got to see it. It's on YouTube.
Oh, it's dreadful, Kieran. Trust me.
So I hear. Yeah. So outside of refereeing, what other stuff did Alex get you to do or try to get you to do? Because nobody ever had one job in the FWA.
So I didn't really do that much because I lived outside of London, right? And I always remember one phone call I got from Elazar, and I loved Elazar, and I was really lucky to kind of get to know him a little bit more during his later years because he used to come to the RevPro shows. But at the time, obviously, again, I'm just a kid. That's what you got to remember. I'm just a kid, just a kid living his dream, And he didn't say much, right? And he would leave lots of long pauses. And I just remember one time a number I didn't recognize called me up, and he's like, "Hi," and he said, just very softly spoken, and he's like, "Hi, is that Andy?" And I was like, "Yes." And then he's like, "It's Elazar." And then I didn't know what. Again, I was like scared, and I'm just like, "Oh, hi." And then just absolute silence. And then he's like, "Can you come postering tomorrow in wherever it was?" And I was just like, "No, I really can't. I live in Essex." And then there's just a long pause. And he's like, "Okay." And hung up. And that was it. and after that point, I was never asked to do anything. So, it was crazy. I just didn't look like, I would have done I feel like I was kind of I would have done anything for them, but I didn't need to be paid for it, but I just needed to get from A to B, and where they weren't willing to contribute towards that, that's kind of why I didn't really have to do anything. So I was really only a referee. So that was it,
Can I just ask, Andy, so obviously it was just refereeing straight on. Did wrestling or becoming a wrestler ever become a kind of ever become a discussion before you became a ref, or was it just straight being a referee at that point?
Do you know what? This conversation is so, I don't know, this is a therapy session, right? This is like...
We did it.
Funnily enough, John Atkins said that too.
we did that with John Atkins. And there's an episode called I Joined a Cult, so you're completely fine, mate. Fire away.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. At least I'm amongst friends. So I can unlock some memories here because you said to me, "Did I do any other jobs?" And I was like, "No, I just did refereeing." I was part of the ring crew as well.
Yeah.
Right? So at some point, they decided they were going to have a proper ring crew and they were going to pay the ring crew, right? So I think at one point, I was one of the highest paid people on the shows, right? Because I got paid to referee and I also got paid £25 to be on the ring crew, right?
Oh.
But anyone who knows the FWA ring will understand the FWA ring was the heaviest ring on planet Earth.
Right? The only thing that didn't weigh a ton were the fucking turnbuckle pads, right?
Right.
It's because those ring posts were full of concrete.
Right. And they were like a Meccano set as well. Like to this day, I've never seen another ring like it. You have to have the bits lined up perfectly. You got the spanner going, and then finally they had John. Do you remember John, the ring stand man? I loved him. He was great.
He once told me I have a tool for every possible operation. It's called a hammer.
There you go, and he made it work. So John was fantastic, but he started bringing his power tools and stuff. But somehow they'd convinced John, and I'm sure he got paid real money because he was like a proper grown up. And somehow they convinced him to store the ring and lots of production stuff on this big lorry that he used to then bring around. I wish I had something like that myself. Rather than my rickety old vans, because it seemed like a good little setup they had going on. I did the ring crew. I'm sure I'm going all over the place, but there'll be probably many tales about not getting paid for stuff. But I do have an uncashed check from the wrestling show, International Showdown, the first one, where they gave me a check and they just wrote cash on the top. And I took it into my bank and they looked at me like I was an idiot, right? and I couldn't cash this check. And and then I spoke to people about it and they were like, "Yeah, you can do it. And somehow I think Greg Lambert managed to cash his check, but I never could. So somewhere in my box of memorabilia, I've got an uncashed check from the Wrestling Channel Super Show, which is probably worth more now than it was at the time. So, and then as far as did I ever want to be a wrestler? No, I didn't want to be a wrestler. Like as a child, I kind of, I did what everyone else did, I guess, and pretended to be a wrestler and fought with my teddy bears, and I had all these visions in my mind. But mine was all more about like playing with action figures. I used to love playing with action figures, which I guess it kind of leads a bit into my later life. The only other memories I have were kind of like I'd remember like the banisters on my stairs. I'd pretend to be Bret Hart and I'd walk along and I'd slap hands with the imaginary fans over the banisters, which obviously were the guardrails. So we did that one. Oh, and sometimes as well, I would, like I say, therapy. Sometimes as well, I'd walk down my street and I'd imagine I was at WrestleMania 9, because obviously it was outdoors, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, my front door is like the entranceway, and like the backstage area is like from the lamppost of my street to my front door, and I'd pretend I was on film in my head, I must have looked very weird to the neighbours, but yeah.
I was going to say, you didn't have someone coming down backwards on an elephant down your street.
Right, yeah. Could have done my street, but yeah.
But so something that's just occurred to me. So our Eddie here has refereed matches in a cave. Where is the weirdest place you've ever refereed a wrestling match? And bonus points if you didn't get paid.
So that's quite loaded, isn't it? I tell you, oh no, that wasn't refereeing. I did a show in a pub. I did a show in a pub garden once, right? And it was like a paid show, right? But it was like under the guise of charity. Like I learned very quickly when I started doing my own thing, when we got our own ring. Never do outdoor shows. Basically, it was in this pub garden, and they were like, they wanted this show, and they're like, can you bring some prizes for the raffle? And so we bought all these prizes, and they were good prizes as well. Like we had like DVDs, we had like foam fingers, we had Rey Mysterio masks, but proper good quality masks and stuff. And they obviously didn't get the turnout that they'd hoped for, and they were travellers at this pub. And they didn't get the turnout they hoped for. We were one match down, and they were getting more and more aggressive as it was kind of going on. And then basically they're like, what have you got? They called me in, they're like, what have you got for the raffle? Right. And I was like, gave them the stuff, and they're looking at it, they're like, what's this shit? What's this? Going through everything, like, this is just a load of crap. This is a charity raffle and you're giving us this shit. Right. And then they're like, and your wrestling's no good. What are we paying for that crap for? Like, literally going off on one. And they're like, we don't want to pay for the rest. And I was like, well, we'll have to go then. And they're like, yeah, good. How much is it going to cost you to pack up and fuck off? Right. So we wound up like packing everything up and leaving, and walking away, like just having some notes, literally notes thrown at me. I'm like, grabbing it, and then I'll take my mask back. Thanks. Right. And then made a quick getaway. And then from that point, my rule of, and I should have known being an FWA kid, just ask for the money up front. But I remember the next open air thing we did after that, they were like, why are you so on edge? Why are you so like adamant about getting this money up front? Don't worry, you can trust us. And I was just like, well, I've been burnt so many times that, we can't be doing that now. So I guess that would be my weirdest wrestling show. I guess I've had many surreal experiences, but I don't really think I did any weird settings like caves or anything like that.
Don't worry, everyone got pneumonia, and I've still not been paid, but I'm not bitter about it whatsoever. So thanks for bringing it up, Kieran.
That wasn't Star Cave, was it? The legendary.
Yes, it was.
I know it very well. Why can't RevPro do innovative things like breed professional wrestling?
I think we know why.
Yes.
I was going to ask, it's more of a later thing, but it's more what good and bad points from your time in the FWA would have you taken into promoting now?
It taught me a lot about what not to do. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, because people often have a go at me when I make this point, but it's best to learn from other people's mistakes, because then you're less likely to make those mistakes yourself.
Yeah.
So it taught me what not to do, that's for sure. But it also taught me a lot about the power of the brand. And it taught me about, and again, because it's so funny, because there was many parts of the FWA that had so much attention to detail, but then there were other parts which were just had nothing at all, but it did teach me about, attention to detail and what you can get from a fan base. If you get a fan base to invest in your product, what you can actually achieve from that, and making the most out of the least, because that's something that I have to do on a day-to-day basis, is just try and make something from nothing, basically. I think I learned so many lessons from Alex. A lot of the bravery, some of the bigger things I did, the bigger gambles, so to speak. Alex told me, he was like, I can't remember what show. I want to say it might have been even the Coventry Sky Dome. But he was just like, look, I don't have the money to make this happen, right? He's like, but you don't have to look at it like needing the money to make it happen. This is a bad lesson. You don't need to look at it as like having the money to make it happen. He's like, you just need to get them to agree to let you announce the event and put it on sale before you have to part with any money. And then once you put it on sale, you can sell some tickets and you can pay the deposit. And then you just make excuses as to when you're going to pay the final bill. So, like, it's just one of those things, But when I first started running shows, my mentality was I have to have the ability to lose 100% of the money that is going into this show, which was obviously a lot easier when my shows were a lot cheaper. But obviously, as time's gone on, some of the old Alex Shane advice comes into play, but obviously the guesses we're making are way more educated. I preach about sustainability within professional wrestling all the time, and that is probably my biggest takeaway from FWA. You've got to be sustainable, because if you're not sustainable, then at some point or another it's going to catch up with you. And I think that's sometimes what leads RevPro into criticism, because I feel like there's often times when I'm overly cautious, but I look at the bigger picture all the time. So I think that's the main thing. I think one of the big things actually as well is utilising international talent. And bringing international talent in to be, because look, again, when I first got into it, we were looking at Bushwhackers, Marty Jannetty, Honky Tonk Man, people like that, right, as your imports that are coming over, and they're just doing the greatest hits. But with FWA, you're looking at these wrestlers we've never even heard of, called Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles, and obviously Jerry Lynn we had heard of, but to a lot lesser extent, and I think that it kind of opened my eyes to what can be achieved by taking wrestlers that are, I guess, in their primes or coming into their primes, maybe in many instances still learning, but because they're coming in, they're attractions and they're different to anything else that is being offered. And one thing I liked as well was the way often FWA would intertwine those international wrestlers into their actual storylines.
Yeah, we were talking about that, like Chris Daniels and Steve Corino, yes. Very much throughout 2004.
I think Corino's the perfect example, because he's actually had a payoff, which a lot of the others didn't really have payoffs to.
And I think something we've mentioned before, the key to the FWA fly-in was these are the guys that are on the tapes that these 500 smart marks are buying from Mark Petar in the corner. So they know their audience knows these people, rather than appealing to the general WWF fan, if you like.
So yes, the Strong Style tapes was actually one of the reasons why a lot of fans went to the shows, because he'd be like, he's got the latest CZW show, or and I say CZW because that was it seems probably alien to fans now, but before Ring of Honor, CZW was probably the hot indie. But yeah, then obviously when Ring of Honor came, people would literally go to the FWA shows just to get the latest Ring of Honor VHS, which I guess is kind of ironic when you think that it was those same tapes which were the downfall of the relationship between FWA and Ring of Honor.
Yeah, we covered that.
Yeah.
So That seems a bit of a childish question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you have a favourite FWA match? And do you have a favourite FWA match that you were part of? If that's not the same thing.
I always remember Doug Williams and Jerry Lynn from the British Uprising 1.
Mm-hmm.
That was always one of my favourites. Match I was a part of. It's funny because I don't even remember if I was a part of it, but I feel like I was. I feel like the Alex Shane and Steve Carino match at I want to say they blew it off somewhere like Morecambe.
They blew it off in Broxbourne.
No, it was Broxbourne. It was Broxbourne. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. There, even if you weren't the official referee, there's a chance you were involved because it's an Alex Shane main event, so there would have been 100 run-ins.
Yeah, I'm sure there were ref bumps and all sorts.
Yeah,
but I think there was just a drama attached to that was probably some of my favourite stuff.
That's one I'm looking forward to us getting to. We've got a few months before we get to that, but I also have fond memories of that show and that match.
Yeah, and to be honest, like a lot of, I think I want to say that whole Broxbourne show might have been so I always say there were two last great Broxbourne shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of them was that one, and I actually really liked the show after British Uprising 3, right? Which I feel was probably Gold Rush, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously everything had to change. Because I think Simmons was originally supposed to be winning the Gold Rush, and it all had to change because he was sick and couldn't make the show.
Right.
But like that was the last sold out. When I say sold out, close to sold out. Broxbourne show where it actually still felt like FWA. So I loved. There was something special about Broxbourne, including the pay queue at the end.
I have a picture of pretty much all of us like waiting to get our brown envelopes.
Right, it was insane.
And I don't know which
right?
Broxbourne it's from, but it's definitely Broxbourne.
So I just remember this, right? So this is one of my lasting memories of FWA, right? So Alex always had the dressing room at the end, right?
Yep.
And there'd always be there'd be a couple of girls in the room with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he'd be sat on the like the other end of a room, and he'd have a desk in front of him. And I always remember seeing like just piles of cash on this desk. And sometimes you might have like Dino or someone else like sat in the room with them as well.
It was usually, to my memory, it was usually Dino and or Barry.
Okay, right. I just remember just being, and you'd get in the queue. And there's a long queue all the way down the corridor of Broxbourne.
Yeah.
And people would be in there for ages, right? And they'd come out, and people would come out the queue that after getting paid, they'd come out the queue and they'd walk back down the queue to the dressing rooms and kind of get their stuff and leave. And as they left the room, there was no signs as to what happened in that room. There was no smile, there was no acknowledgement. You'd never know. They'd never prep you for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd get in the room. And I always remember this question. I learned very quickly to change my answer to this one. The key Alex Shane question. How much do you need this money right now?
Oh.
Right? and if you were like, oh, I'm okay at the moment. Like, would it be okay if we paid you next time? Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Right. I remember I did the tour, and it would have been that tour where I turned 18. So, so I'd definitely done something before that tour. But yeah, so we did Morecambe, we did Bolton, we did one of those, what was it, FWA Unsigned?
Unsigned, yeah. There was Morecambe, right. 2 Boltons, and
was it Broxbourne at the end? Yeah. So I did that. So I did that full stretch, and then when we got to the end of it, it was like, oh, can we pay you in the next show or whatever? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then, oh, they've got it. Can we pay you in Broxbourne after the Bolton? It's like, yep, sure, okay. So go to Broxbourne. We're like, is it okay to just pay you for just Broxbourne, and then we'll pay you for the tour at the next one? And then it got to the next one, and then Alex somehow did this mental gymnastics with me, where basically he explained how no one on the FWA Unsigned show got paid. Therefore, it would be unfair if I took a wage for the FWA Unsigned show as well. And I should be grateful that I was getting the money for the other couple of shows. Because obviously, because in Alex's mind, he was paying me triple my wage, even though he owed me for 4 shows, right?
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
talked me out of it, and I was like, okay, thank you. And like I say, you'd walk down this queue after getting paid, and then sometimes Alex would just be like, oh, we've got no money, and I'd just look at the desk. There's a sack of money, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously that was back in the days when everything was cash. And
Yeah.
I do remember there were times when they'd have to get money from Strong Style Tapes. They'd have to get cash from him because I think wasn't he the promoter of the early Broxbourne shows?
Yeah, he promoted early Broxbourne, and him paying the rental fee for his table like funded at least part of a lot of the other shows as well.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Because I do remember the famous. I don't know if it's a famous story, but I remember the story of Ralph when he took over the merchandising, and obviously Ralph's a very very smart guy. A lot of the stuff that he's like, I guess. With the benefit of hindsight, I look at it and say Ralph was probably one of the adults in the room who was just kind of.
I was going to say you described John as a proper grown up. Ralph was also very much a proper grown up.
Right, and so he did merchandise, and I just remember so obviously he had the vision for it, but I remember after he made a lot of money on the first batch of merchandise, he purchased a van. Right, I think it was like a little. I want to say he purchased a van. It was like a little van, not a big one, but to move the merchandise from show to show. Right, and then they never had any money to buy any more merchandise because they're like, well, you've just spent the money on a van. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, well, how are we supposed to get it from here to here? It's not cost effective. Not being able to transport the thing that's making us money. So then they didn't make new merchandise, or that was an excuse I was told anyway as to why the merchandise production stopped. And again, it could be true. It could be, just wrestling whispers, that you hear all the time. But yeah, no one would smarten anyone up to the fact there was no money there. And like there'd come times at some shows, especially near the end, where it would just be like, we've got no money left. And literally someone would walk out the room, they've not been paid, but they don't go, boys, there's no money left. They just let you go in and find out for yourself. And sometimes you're in this queue for like an hour plus, because like I say, Alex is probably playing Jedi mind tricks on people.
Everybody's got to have a 5-minute chat with everybody, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And there's 40 people who need to get paid.
Right. And it's weird though, because I say all of this about Alex, and I'm sure maybe we'll talk about him in a bit, but like, I've got no ill feeling towards Alex whatsoever. He was in a very tough position. He used to make the impossible possible, right? And he just had a way with words, didn't he? But like, I credit Alex for so much of my career, even though he probably ripped me off quite a lot in my career.
The way I word it is everybody falls under the show steal a spell once.
Right, that's it. Well, I fell under his spell multiple times. I think probably I'm still under it a little bit. I think probably he could probably give me a call tomorrow and convince me to do something or invest in a crazy idea, because even later on, I did do crazy Alex Shane ideas, and then I'm just like, how have I fallen for this again? I remember I did the wrestling media con. We did the second British J Cup 2 days there, and like Alex has sold me this dream, and I turn up and I'm literally like, if it wasn't for me bringing like Jushin Liger and whoever else I brought along to these media con shows, it'd just be a load of fat dudes selling videotapes or DVDs and T-shirts. Like he promised me, like he was like, there's going to be all these guests. He's like, we're going to have because it's like media con, we're going to have Colt Cabana there. Like, I think he actually did deliver. Basically, he started off strong. He started off with Dave Meltzer and Pat Patterson, right? Yeah, and but in typical Alex fashion, and I know this for a fact, right? But I say I know this for a fact, I know how this would have gone down, right? Alex had this great idea, and it was great on paper. Now, Alex thought he's going to put this show on sale, and when it sells, all of a sudden, he's going to have loads of money. He's at, we don't worry about it yet. We'll worry about paying for stuff later. So we'll just get a couple of guests sorted, enough to sell enough tickets to pay the deposit on the building. Once we've done that, we'll see how much money we've got in the pot, and then we'll decide what guests to get. And basically all these names he told me were going to be there were not there at all. So you just had Dave Meltzer and Pat Patterson. That was pretty much it. And Yeah, and I just walked in and I'm just like, oh my God, what have we done? And it was just like, the venue was lifeless. And as well, and I think there was a TNA show on that weekend as well. It
Mm.
wasn't a proper TNA show. There was a TNA show on that weekend also. And somehow he even convinced me to provide the ring for free. Right? And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, I just couldn't, but like, I was just like, he's done it again. He's actually done it again. Right. And I'm a grown up at this stage, and this is all my fault, you know? But, what I will say is, like, I always say about him, like, a lot of the ideas he had, he always would go into it with the best intentions, but maybe not the best thought process going into it.
He needed funneling, editing, and money.
Yes, it. Yeah. That's it.
Like the Alex Shane, the good Alex Shane ideas needs to go through a Logic Sieve quite often, I think, to like actually work. And it's only in hindsight when you watch something back you think, hang on, that's very clever, but it doesn't actually quite make sense.
Right, and I mean, it goes to show, like, obviously his biggest success obviously was Wrestle Talk, and that obviously happened when he was more grown up as well. Because you know, look, we all forget how young Alex was at the time as well.
He's younger than me.
Well, you're just aging yourself there, aren't you? So.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Alex was for all intents and purposes the kid, right?
Yeah.
And I always say, like, because we go through stages in our life, and I'm always like, when you get to a certain age, you think you know everything, and then you get a bit older, and you're like, I didn't have a clue, right?
Yeah.
And I would say, really, it's not really until about 25 when you start understanding that you didn't have a clue. And like, I think even now I'm still figuring stuff out. I just think I think it's even more remarkable. And I think that's what has to be remembered when you look at Alex and you look at everything he achieved, like to be the head of this company at such a young age, I think was quite remarkable.
Yeah, he was named managing director at the age of 23. Nobody should be the managing director of anything other than their fucking football manager team at 23.
Yeah, I think I might have been doing that at 23 as well, but I was a bit more modest with it. I was crawling before I could walk, for sure.
Fair.
So obviously we've seen you during this whole as the referee, and you've become my favorite referee over the course of the FWA episodes.
You suck up.
Shut up.
Referee will get you everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's also true, to be fair, because it's either him or Linsky, and then there were the couple others down the line before that at that point. What is the most kind of important thing you took from wrestling refereeing that you then took into your kind of future now, and what did you enjoy about being a ref within FWA?
I took everything from being a referee, honestly. Like, I feel the referee is probably the most unsung hero on any wrestling show. You often find the referees wind up becoming office because they're kind of trusted and whatever. And I learned about it. I don't want to say necessarily through it. Basically, look, everything was through FWA, because what you need to understand is, obviously, outside of your quote unquote old school promotions, any pop-up promotion, the name FWA had so much credibility behind it. So I could literally be like, oh, I'm the FWA referee. It's like booked straight away, right? Paid straight away, because everyone thinks that FWA is professional and is paying everyone, right? But when I was doing those shows, you kind of learn so a whole variety of things. So it was kind of almost match structure. You can learn what works well at certain points in the card. You learn a lot about so the terminology I use, I don't know what the official terminology is like gear changes. So if you watch some of the best wrestlers in the world, you know, who are able to go from 0 to 100 and able to pace their matches, so you know it's not just all on one level. You know, sometimes you don't know sometimes you don't know you're watching it unless you actually think about it. So you think about the
Yeah.
great wrestlers. So think about a Bryan Danielson, or like even like Will Ospreay's like real great of all of a sudden burst of energy, you know. But so I learned about that, you know, when it's time to come up, and when it's time to show aggression, when it's time to show intensity. Again, the cadence of the count. Like when I look back, my count was actually very quick. Right.
We have noticed you are lightning fast in the early days for sure.
Yeah.
but do you know why that is? Right. Because if you watch ECW, right.
Oh God,
Finnegan
is
on ECW.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like the parking's running out, and he's got to go and put money in the meter. Yeah.
And I think that was a big part of my early influence. Right. I don't think there was no one in FWA who really taught me about refereeing. It wasn't until I did the NWE shows later that I kind of really learned about refereeing, and like specifically, it was Rikishi taught me like so much about refereeing, and that's why you always get like in RevPro, you always get shout out to Rikishi because Ricky Knight Jr. uses the Rikishi driver, and he's like, I forget what he's like he's called the whatever, the Knight's Landing or whatever bollocks he's come up with for the name of the move, and I'm just like, it's Rikishi driver, mate. You know what I mean? Like, and so yeah, and what's funny is when I was calling it the Rikishi driver, and it already started in the Empty Arena tapings where we were kind of like, let's get this move over. And then obviously, then since that point, people have come and called it the Rikishi driver, as in the Ricky, you know, the Ricky Ishii driver. So, you know, so that's why there's always a shout out to, I try to give nods of the hat to, you know, people who've kind of influenced me in some way, shape or form, which is why so many of the RevPro shows have similar names to FWA shows and stuff like that. But yeah, so I guess kind of it's all about the placement of matches, what works well, and then the next big thing, which is where I feel like FWA actually failed in the end, was being a referee meant I'd go all over the country and I'd be exposed to new talent. Right. And I feel like what FWA didn't do, they didn't transition to new talent quickly enough. Or put faith in young talent, and it's something that I always make sure we do. So that's one of the big takeaways I took from FWA, was about making sure you've got this conveyor belt of talent. And who knew that WWE would take an interest in the UK wrestling scene, and then those lessons I learned from FWA would have come into play because I had a conveyor belt of talent. So yeah, so I think that was very important as well. But like I just remember I was, you know, I saw like Spud before Spud was a big deal. You know, I saw you know, Martin Stone. I was like, he's the guy you need to build this thing around. And he's like, how about you just become Alex's security? And it's like, no, but he could be the guy for you right now. And you know, you could almost see it. Like, I mean, we did it like when he was years past his prime, but you could almost see like a Flash Barker putting over a Martin Stone as you know, the next guy. And it's like they were always so desperate to find the next Doug Williams that they weren't looking at everything else around them, you know. So being able to see all that different talent in different environments and see what how well they worked and stuff like that kind of influenced me a lot and helped me a lot as well.
Yeah, because it was just when you were saying, obviously, when you talked about the referee training, and I just imagined that someone was on top of a ladder holding up a referee shirt and telling like whoever's the first to go up and get it. So you were kind of self-trained in terms of that part. There wasn't really any.
I really well. I mean, there was kind of rough. There was rough training in obviously the 1-day training course, and then everything else was on the job. And obviously, the more veterans you were, I was lucky. I did a lot of shows with Robbie Brookside. He worked for Adam Mumford and obviously Adam Mumford wound up giving me a few referee jobs. But yeah, it's funny when you're talking about the ladder and the referee shirt. I do have a ladder story. So there was a FWA Academy did the first ladder match, and they hung the belt on the truss before the show, right? And then the show starts, and I look up, and the belt's not there. Right, so they've taken it down, but they've not told me they've taken it down. And then it gets to intermission, and they're like, "We need you to put the belt up," right? And I'm scared of heights, right? I'm so scared of heights, right? And the FWA ring was so padded. If you look at some of the shows with the FWA rings, there's almost too much padding. Like there's a balance between in wrestling rings, everyone's like, oh, you've not got enough padding, but there's also too much padding, right? Because obviously you need to be able to get your footing and everything. And I want to say specifically the training school ring was even more padded, right? So put this ladder down in the middle of the ring. I've never climbed a ladder in my life either. And I start to climb it, and it quickly comes to me that to get it up, because it was like a spider web across the lighting truss, in the Buckland Community Centre, I might add. So, Buckland Community Centre with a lighting truss. It's unbelievable. Like we always call it the Bucklands Dome now. We've actually got a trainee show there this weekend, so it's great that we're able to still go there with the same curtains and the same wallpaper and everything. The old FWA Academy belt was like the old WWF Winged Eagle title, and it had all the clasps, the grips and everything, but the way it was, you literally had to unclasp it and then put it together and then push all the poppers together, because obviously it was hanging on this thing. And to do that, I had to go all the way to the very top of the ladder. And if it was before the show, I'd probably feel a little bit safer. But everyone's watching me do it, and the ladder's wobbling all over the place. And I'm scared for my life. And then somehow, some way, like this is what I say about wrestling, just making me just do these crazy things that I would never, like in any other walk of life, I'd just be like, there's not a chance that I'm going to climb that ladder. But I'm so, I don't know if scared's the right word or intimidated's the right word, or I've just got so much respect for the business, because back in the day that, they'd talk about, being, it was so important to be a pro, right? It was so important to be I don't know. Wrestling comes above everything else. You'll make your town, you make your dates, right? If something went wrong, I just remember, like, here's an example. It's an IPW example. But I said, it's not like this now, right? I hear all the excuses about people no showing their bookings, right? But I remember there was a global gauntlet. Ultimo Dragon was in the gauntlet. And Pac was so nervous about the match, which is crazy when you think about how good Pac is and even was then. He was so nervous about the match that he crashed his car on the way to the show, right? So he crashed his car, and his first thought wasn't like, I'm turning back with his car. His first thought was, right, let's get the AA out. Let's get them to tow the car back home, and let's get me a taxi to the nearest train station and get me to the show, and we will worry about everything else afterwards. And that's what he did. He made the booking. So my whole mindset about wrestling, and I think everyone's in that day, was, wrestling is just the most important thing on planet Earth, even if you risk literally killing us. Because I just needed someone to hold the ladder for me, but I was too afraid. I was just like, I've been asked to do this, I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
And imagine that, if that was my legacy, dying in front of 20 people at the Buckland Community Centre. Do you know what I mean?
So we're not really going to be going beyond early 2005, because that's when the TV runs out. But how long did you stick around?
I think you're a coward. I think you need to go to FWA 2.0.
It wasn't on the telly. This is my get out. I don't want to watch that shit.
How long did I stick around? I can't remember. So I feel like the big turning point for me was there was a show which was the same day as an IPW show, because obviously I became the booker of IPW. And it killed me, but it also taught me a lesson, right? But like FWA, they brought in Bret Hart, right? And it was, I want to say, it was in Colchester maybe, right? And it was the same day that we had a show. And on that show, we had Teddy Hart and Harry Smith, right? So it was a bit crazy, but it was all going on the same day, right?
Yeah.
But you have to understand how much it killed me that I could, because I'm the biggest Bret Hart fan in the world. He was my guy. He was number one. The probably my favorite memories of running wrestling shows and being with RevPro is, that first show we brought Bret Hart in, and him doing, like Tanahashi did air guitar to Bret Hart's theme, right?
Yeah.
And it was actually FWA alumni Ian Logan was on music on that day, and he screwed up the cue for because I wanted Tanahashi to G up, put in the air guitar on before Bret Hart's music played. We got the aesthetic we needed, but you need to understand, I was so pissed off. I really shouted at Ian. I was like, "What the? This is the fucking moment," you know. But yeah, so it was an absolute thrill to be able to work with Bret Hart. But obviously, I think that's when I realised it wasn't sustainable, essentially doing both. Because you know, we did those, but then to me it was like, we've got the future. We've got how wrong I was, but we've got Teddy Hart, and we've got, you know, Davey Boy Smith Jr., and they've got like the old Hart Foundation. We've got the new Hart Foundation, you know, and there's almost everything we were doing was like fresh, edgy, and exciting, and everything that you know, everything that FWA seemed to be doing was just, it was going through that same patterned formula, you know. And I think that really was an eye-opener to me, and I do think there was definitely an air of resentment from some people in FWA to what I was doing in IPW. I always remember this one time, right? So Andy Simmons, right? You know, you'd say stuff in jest, right? And he couldn't help himself. He had to share it with everyone, which is why our podcast, you know, it's why our podcast was so good while it lasted, because you know, he loves telling stories, right? And I feel like when I listened back to that podcast, I was like, I was in a stage of, I did not give a shit. I would literally just be like, you know, this happens, you know, and I just like, I don't care. You know, because my mentality about all of this stuff, by the way, is I'm just like, if you always speak the truth, your truth, you don't have to worry, right? Because I think so many people worry about making up stories, but then when they then go and do other podcasts, they then tell different versions of the story because they can't remember the lies they've told, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, you just tell the truth and who cares? But anyway, I'd spoken to Andy in jest. I was joking, right? About, and this was around the rise and fall of ECW. And I spoke about the rise and fall of FWA, right? And I was like, I'm going to make the documentary, The Rise and Fall of FWA, right? And of course, first thing he does is tell Alex, right? But I don't know. I don't know he's told Alex this, right? And then I get a phone call, and I'm like, "All right, Alex." No, I'm not all right. And then he reads the riot act to me about, you know, when someone works their whole life to try and achieve something and blah, blah, blah. And then you find out that you're trying to profiteer from it. And then basically he was like, he was offended that first of all I suggested there was a fall of the FWA. And then he was even more offended that it was me that was going to be able to monetize it and not him. Right. and I was just like, it was a joke. I didn't mean it. You know, I was joking. Like, we used to pretend to be the Four Horsemen. We used to have that Four Horsemen, you know, that Ric Flair DVD, you know, a day, and there's like an extra called The Day in the Life of the Four Horsemen. And we used to pop ourselves by saying quotes from that thing. And, you know, and so I was probably taking stuff from the rise and fall of ECW and like contextualizing it as an FWA thing. So I'd replace, you know, the name Sandman with Jack Xavier or something, you know. Yeah, and then somehow that came back to bite me. And then, yeah, so I remember things were never quite the same after that. And like I said, I can't quite remember my last FWA show, but I do remember stuff like, so Greg Lambert had taken over by this point. And it was like in a leisure centre. And it wasn't, because there was a terrible one they did in Enfield where they had the Dirk Feelgood therapy couch or something, was it? I don't know. There was
I think so. I think that comes after our little purview, but we have seen 2 shows from the giant green screen studio that is the Southbury Leisure Centre in Enfield. Second worst venue FWA ever ran, behind Newport.
See, I seem to remember it being nice, good crowds in like, I've not looked back at any of the stuff, but I always seem to remember the Enfield shows were decent crowds. But there was some leisure centre, and I honestly can't remember where it was. And I always want to be like Colchester somewhere because I feel like it was around that way. But there was some kind of angle going on, and like there was when I say there was no one in the crowd, there was probably like maybe 50 people in the crowd, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember this, and it was just like, this is not what it's done. You know, it's all done, right? And I just remember there was this angle going on in front of us, right? And Greg was at the curtain going like, yes, because obviously stuff that he'd scripted was coming off before his eyes. But I was just like, how can you feel that about this, knowing where it was, you know, and I feel like it was never the same.
This is not my FWA anymore.
Yeah, and for me, I feel it was never the same after that Gold Rush show. I feel from that point onwards, it was never the same. And
that's when I left.
Yeah, and well, there you go. It must be you. It must be you. Yeah. So yeah, it's I don't know, but I stuck it out for. But we had some good times. After that, we did there was like a Blackpool and Morecambe double shot, and that was real fun. Do you remember Johnny Angel?
I don't think I ever saw any Johnny Angel. I'm aware that he was a local guy, right?
Yeah, he's a local guy, like an old school wrestler. I think.
Yeah,
I think he'd tagged with like the British Bulldog, but he was friends with Stevie Knight, and he was just such a great guy, and like you know, so there was still very fond memories coming out of the FWA, but it was just it wasn't our FWA, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think we should probably skip Frontiers of Honor 2, but we would be a bit remiss if we didn't talk about the IPW versus FWA Final Frontiers show. Can you talk a bit about how that came about and like the challenges in putting it all together? Like when was the seed for that planted?
So Final Frontiers was my final love letter to FWA. All right. The build to it, everything involved in it. I unearthed Scotty Rock. I convinced Flash Barker to come out of retirement and gave him the biggest payday of his career to that point. What else did we do? There were so many things we did, you know, but that show came about quite simply because so Alex called me up. It always starts with Alex, right?
Yeah.
So Alex called me up and he was like, look, we've got this Broxbourne Civic Hall show booked, and we've paid. I think they paid the deposit on the building. You know, that's all we've got to do: pay the deposit, then hope for the best, right? And it was maybe like a month or so out from the show, and he was just like, "We've not sold any tickets. Like, Greg isn't very. Like, I think Greg was in charge. Greg was in charge of FWA by this point, and he's just like, Greg only really wants to do Morecambe now because he doesn't want to have to go and poster and whatever have you. So he was like, would you be interested in taking over the show as IPW? And of course, I jumped at it. I was like, yes, because you know, like, I just want to be in Broxbourne Civic Hall. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So was that the first IPW in Broxbourne?
Yeah, it was called Hot
/ only IPW in Broxbourne. I don't know how many. You did.
I think there was a couple in Broxbourne, right. But like this was but I had a few months absence from IPW before my first falling out. Before then, obviously the big one later.
Yeah.
I think there was a second, but there was a few shows in IP. I promoted 2 in Broxbourne as IPW. I'm sure.
Okay.
And then I know there was like an IPW versus the world, which I had nothing to do with.
Right.
But like that was the first one in Broxbourne. There was all kinds of stuff. Again, typical Alex was like, you know, 1PW were running a show that weekend, right? And he was like, you can have anyone you want from the 1PW show. And I was like, I want AJ Styles. It's like, yes, you can have AJ Styles, no problem whatsoever, right? And then so we've got AJ Styles booked for this show in Broxbourne. We're going to do AJ Styles versus Pac was going to be the match. And then maybe a few weeks before, Alex was like, sorry, you can't have AJ Styles anymore. And he's like, you can have Colt Cabana, right? And which was fine. I love Colt, right?
But that's not the same match, is it? Right? Colt Cabana versus Pac is not the same as AJ Styles versus Pac.
I think we actually wound up doing Pac versus El Generico on that show.
Sure.
And I think Colt Cabana worked someone else, but I remember Colt Cabana was a heel, and like Colt Cabana didn't like the IPW owner because he had him in for his first IPW show and only used him as a ring announcer. So basically, Colt Cabana was a heel on the show, and Colt Cabana let out a lot of his real life frustrations in the promo. Is the way I remember it, right? But Colt was like basically one of the catalysts of this feud, based on being an FWA guy, right? You know, this isn't. I can't remember what, you know, the exact way he termed it, but it's almost like, you know, FWA is a proper promotion, not like this promotion. So he kind of had those instincts. And then I want to say, was this where we had Alex hit Dan with a chair? Was that on that show?
I'm struggling to remember if I was at that show or not. I might have been, but I think
I think so. So we had those chairs.
yeah.
We used to gimmick the chair, like you used to undo the screws on the chair. So they got a wooden back and a foam front. But you undo the screws and then you hit someone over the head with the chair. And of course, it's a great visual because the seat pops out, and then you've got so it doesn't give you brain damage. And you've got the frame of a chair over your head.
Yeah, the old horse collar. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure on that show he did that to Dan, and that was like Dan's first bit of stuff in front of an audience. He was very reluctant to do it, but we convinced him it would be a good idea.
In hindsight, smacking him on the head with a chair, fucking brilliant idea.
No comment. I'm
allowed to say it. You don't have to.
Yeah, well, I'm not going down any of these rabbit holes. I've learned.
No, fine. Carry on. Please continue with your story, sir.
So then the idea is Alex has pitched this idea of doing I can't remember who came up with the name Final Frontiers, but he came up with the idea of ending FWA because Greg just wanted to rebrand. And again, I guess this goes back to what I was saying about, Greg being stood in the empty hall going, yes, yes, yes. I think Greg knew that it's not the same, it's stupid. And what he'd built up in Walkham was very special.
I was going to say, and to give Greg credit, like he took that rebrand and ran with it and made a success of it.
Yeah, he was doing great. Like, and his form of wrestling, he was almost promoting the family wrestling, but it was a high level of family wrestling, and he was doing those same G's that we spoke about when in my first started watching wrestling. But instead of going, next time we're here, there's a street fight, and it's a completely different crew of wrestlers. It's the same crew of wrestlers, and shock horror, you actually get to see your street fight. And then when the locals realise that they get what they're delivered, then when they see those G's, they come back next time. It's very simple wrestling, and it worked.
Deliver on your promises,
absolutely, and that's what Greg was able to do. But he was rebranding, so Alex was like, Greg's not tied to the FWA name, so like we can use it for a story to kill it. And then I think then at this point it was probably like, and I've got and I can produce the DVDs and whatever, I'm sure. So the idea with Final Frontiers was Alex also had a load of dates in Broxbourne booked in, right, which he was on the hook for and wanted to get out of. So Final Frontiers was supposed to happen in Broxbourne, right? That was the original date it was supposed to happen. It's all supposed to be sorted and good, and then it gets to Final Frontiers, or it gets close to Final Frontiers, and what happens is we then get a call from Alex going, there's a slight problem. Sanjay Bagga has got whatever council Broxbourne was under, there was another council-run venue down the road, and Sanjay Bagga had basically got I don't know if he'd got an exclusive on that venue, but he'd booked in multiple dates in that venue, and Sanjay had said like, oh, there's a show running in Broxbourne Civic Hall, like, which is the week before my show or something along those lines, and he's like, I'm not happy with it. And basically the council pulled our show, which obviously was an FWA date. So we just inherited, we didn't know any of the politics or anything. We just inherited that date. And then obviously, and Sanjay, this was like, I was always absolutely cool with Sanjay until this moment, where Sanjay up, getting that show cancelled, but I was in communication with him throughout, where I'm saying to like, what do we need to do to be able to make this happen? And Sanjay's like giving me the impression that everything's going to be good and he's going to give the green light for us to do it, and he screwed me at the last second, right? So I was just like, and I've never, look, I've still got no ill feeling towards him. I don't care. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's doing his thing, like, like his shows are his shows. I've got no interest in kind of beefing with other British wrestling promoters and whatever, and he did what he thought was best for his business at the time, but as a result of that, we lost that Broxbourne date. So then we booked another Broxbourne date. I can't remember how we wound up losing that date, but I do know somewhere along the line we'd done all the angles to build up to it, and there was the big match was supposed to be Alex Shane versus Martin Stone, right? And somewhere along the line Alex was like, I'm injured, I've got like another one of his retirements, right?
His story at the time I seem to recall was he did a practice match possibly at the academy, on an academy show, and decided he wasn't in good enough shape, like good enough ring shape to do it. So I was like, I'm going to find a man who is in good enough ring shape to do it. Black Parker.
who hasn't wrestled in years.
So I have to say that, but while Flash Barker might not have been in the best of shape on that show, that is one of the hardest working performances I've ever seen a wrestler put in a match.
Absolutely.
He worked his arse off to make that as good as he possibly could.
Yeah, and it was great, and it was a fantastic. Honestly, it was such a fantastic match, and the show, and I think everything about it. Like, so I found Scott Parker, you know, like all these great old FWA names. I kind of I found and was able to kind of deliver this Final Frontiers show, and we got Zebra Kid recently out of prison. I think it was. I can't think of a nice.
Just come back from holiday, yeah.
Yeah. But obviously he was always like an FWA favorite, and he was like the big surprise in that opening tag match. Do you know what? We never got Jack Xavier, and I feel like that was probably the one miss.
I've kind of alluded to it. I know where he is. I know how to find him. But I'm going to leave him alone.
Okay, so I actually saw, and I can't remember when this was, but I actually saw Jack Xavier not so long ago. When I say not so long ago, it was probably pre-COVID.
The last time I saw him in person was Alex's Brit Res Fest at that Coronet Theatre.
Okay, that might be where I saw him.
Yeah, but that now is like 12 or 13 years ago.
Wow, that's insane.
But he was in great shape. He had a suit. He had like a proper job. The works, yeah.
And a tan. Yeah, he looked like a superstar.
Yeah, he did.
And yeah, so but obviously at the time he was the one that I couldn't track down. But like, but yeah, like everyone thought it'd be impossible to get Scotty Rock, but you know, we found him.
I'll just search the bins. You'll find him.
Right. But yeah, so like I just everything about it just kind of I just loved it, right? And obviously we had FWA and IPW both had heel champions. Like I have to kind of explain this to some of my trainees because they were like, we watched the worst match ever. So we had like Andy Simmons and Robbie Brookside, right? But the whole gimmick was we wanted the fans to boo. So we kind of had the manufacture a match where we wanted the fans to chant boring, boring, boring. Then they both walk out on the match because they're like, we don't care about FW. I don't care. Robbie, the FWA champion, is like, I don't care about FWA. Andy, the IPW champion, is like, I don't care about IPW. Why are we fighting for these guys? Do you know what I mean? Let's go to the back and have a cup of tea. You know, they walked off. It just walked out on the match. And then obviously then they play a big part in, you know, we did the old ECW, the ref bump and all the millions of run-ins, and you know, it was Andy and Robbie that created that final moment of, and I think it was Robbie that finally killed FWA by hitting Flash Barker with his own FWA championship belt. So it really created a great moment, and we had like the sections of the crowds. So there was like an IPW section and an FWA section. I think we had an IPW ring announcer, which would have been John Atkins, and maybe Dean Ayas was the FWA one.
Yes, and they had a scrap as well. Yeah.
And right, that's it. Yeah, cat fight. Yeah. So yeah. When I look back at it now, right, I think the thing that upsets me the most about that is that if it was now, we could have done. I don't know. Look, I guess that's part of its charm, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, now that it's not Orpington, it's York Hall at the least, right?
Right. And
you would be able to find Jack Xavier, and you would be able to find these various people. Yeah.
And we'd put we'd use video packages to show, like, so if it was RevPro and FWA, we'd use video packages to show FWA's influence on RevPro and all of that stuff. And I think it would have been real nice, but for what we had available to us and the little resources we had available to us, I think we've really pulled it off. But it was really annoying because we've done really good angles with Alex leading up to it as well. And then maybe, you know, a few months later, Alex wound up coming back and doing the match with Martin. But by that point, we'd moved to Bromley and it wasn't the same. And and it was a good match and whatever have you. But like, it just would have been the most appropriate finish for that show.
Yeah, it's a fitting send off for quote unquote our FWA, if you like. I mean, a peek behind the curtain, I think that show is probably going to be our final episode.
I feel responsible. Maybe you could do an episode where you look at FWA's influence and all the positive things it's done. And
So, in a cheesy segue, in terms of
Send them to my website or something.
in a cheesy segue, in terms of the things that FWA has positively influenced, we have to talk about Revolution Pro Wrestling. Born on August the 26th, 2012. Originally IPW UK Summer Sizzler in Sittingbourne, on the spot becomes the first RevPro show. I don't know if you remember, but despite just being a punter, I was somehow in the locker room as you were talking about all the issues you've been having and the wanting to split from IPW. I bumped into someone who was working the show at the station. He said, "Come and say hello to everyone." And the only people I knew were you and Dave Mastiff. But I ended up like hanging around as you were like canvassing opinion and grappling with the decision to pull the trigger. And it's clearly the right choice because some 400 odd shows later, like which promotion is still around?
Right.
But I guess my question out of all that is, what was it about that day and that show that made it the right time?
It has all reached a head. Look, I don't want to go into the long form. Like, obviously, if you ever do another season, which it actually involves FWA 2.0, but like, there was a whole long drawn out saga where I was promoting all the IPW shows. Dan wasn't doing anything to do with them, and every now and again he'd come up and he'd run a show in the changing room of Swanley, right? And I would always be feeling that his shows would be a detriment to what I was trying to achieve, and he would feel that my shows were a detriment to the business which he was trying to operate, which was essentially a training school where if the trainees are on the shows, then you're going to put more money, guaranteed revenue through the door of your training school, which is the only guaranteed money maker. Right. If you have an open door policy with your training schools. Now, we have an open door policy with our training schools, but we treat it very seriously. So we're not going to just humour someone because they're paying money on the door, right? And I think that was a fundamental difference. Now, that show specifically, like, I just had enough. Like, we'd had myself and Dan had another falling out where basically I think Dan was trying to I don't want to say take back control of IPW, but almost lay a
cement a stake, like, because like it was like his thing to start with, wasn't it?
And it was never, IPW was never my thing, and IPW was always his baby. It was him and his dad's business. And when I was promoting shows, like, there was a crossroads, because we'd had a falling out when you and I worked together with RQW, which I'm sure we could do a whole shoot interview on.
I mean, I skipped over that because we've already been going an hour and a half.
but obviously that was the first falling out I had, and then when I came back after that, things were never quite the same. But there was always like a boundary in terms of, we started running shows together, but then it became a case of, well, if you can't be bothered to get out of bed and put posters up, then why should I? And then I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm sabotaging my own show just because I feel that someone else isn't pulling their weight, so to speak. Right? So I was just like, this is absolute madness. So basically, we wound up, as I feel like we wound up being grown-ups in the situation and just being like, right, from now on, you run your shows and I run my shows. And that's the way it worked. Like, I just ran my shows, Dan ran his shows. Obviously, my shows were more prominent, more regular. I think he went maybe a couple of years only running 1 or 2 shows. So I became what IPW was known for and what IPW was, and the identity of IPW. And in my mind, I was working for IPW and trying to just grow the IPW brand. Now, I think to age it, it would have been 2009. Was the time when I was really started to run properly, in terms of where I was like, when I was running enough shows where I was like, maybe we could try and turn this passion into a profession. And 2009 was the year I founded my company, which I just called Dynamic Wrestling Limited, because I just couldn't, I went to the accountants and they were like, what's the name of your promotion? And I was like, well, I can't really call it IPW, can I? So I was just like, I don't know, it's Dynamic Wrestling.
It is the Titan Sports to the World Wrestling Federation, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. So so that was formed in 2009. So that would have been when I started taking shows more seriously and doing my own thing. And then there were several things along the way which made me feel like this isn't for me. I remember one of the big things was, so I got the whole website redesigned, but obviously Dan had access to everything. But I paid for and got the website redesigned. I had new belts made and paid for them. I did, like I did everything off my own back. And what happened was I did that. I was supposed to be doing a show with NWE, and that's another big mistake of my life. So I wound up getting advertising in a national newspaper, which I want to say is the Daily Mirror. And I got an advert in the Daily Mirror. And on the day that advert went in the Daily Mirror, so on the front page of the website, there was a featured event, right? And my poster, so Kevin Nash on the poster, Carlito, Chris Masters, like big, colourful, bright poster. And on the day that advert went in the Daily Mirror, it just said, get your tickets now, ipwuk.com. I went on ipwuk.com, and the featured event poster had been changed to something from the Swanley changing room. Like, just, it was crap. And I'm just like, this is it. This is why we can't do this. This is why it's not going to work. And we went on a little bit long. So that would have been maybe April. Probably it'd be the start of 2012. Right. Yeah. So that was when the writing was basically on the wall. And then obviously from that point on, there were kind of several other things. The final instance, it came down to, again, I'm saying names and you're just like, but I'm saying names, so I can't say redacted. Like,
you can if you want.
Daniel Edler. Oh, look, we're here now. Notoriously bad drunk Daniel Edler got into a fight with notoriously bad drunk Jimmy Havoc. Right?
Jesus Christ.
This is nothing to do with me. I wasn't there. Nothing to do with me. Right? Jimmy wound up punching Dan on this night out. Look at Andy's disgusted. He's walking off. He's like,
no.
Walking.
No, he's got to refill his glass of weird green soft drink.
No, it's water.
Oh, okay.
I need to tell you one story as well about one of my.
All right, let's finish this one and then we'll start the other one.
But yeah, so he got punched. Whatever. I don't think anything of it. I'm running shows. I run it many people don't know. I only run one camp now, but at the time I used to run two camps. And Jimmy did a couple of camp shows for me, right? And again, none of this was anything to do with Dan whatsoever. And somehow, the results very rarely were posted anywhere. But somehow the results of this camp show got posted somewhere, or maybe Jimmy put a picture up with everyone. I don't know, but somehow Dan saw that Jimmy was on the camp show, and he basically sent me a message, basically being like, "How dare you book Jimmy Havoc?" Right? Which hindsight would say that he was a bit of a visionary, because that seems to be what's been going around the internet these last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, I'll book who I want on my shows. You're both as bad as each other, and drunk. I want to say drunk behaviour was probably more of a thing in those days than it is now. In terms of and not just in a wrestling sense. I get the sense of, well, I don't know. I speak, maybe just some of the trainees at my training school have got no life. I don't know, but I speak to the trainees, and they all tell me about what they kind of get up to, and I just remember we used to go out drinking, and used to go to pubs and then clubs, and now they all just sit at home. They sit at home. If they're having drinks, they sit at home and drink, and it's a completely different world to what it was then. So so stuff like this would happen all the time. And of course, if you're around FWA and you're around the show stealer nights out and all of that stuff, then you wouldn't blink twice to fights breaking out on nights out or anything like that. Yeah, so I don't think that Dan actually believed that I was going to go through with it, because it was kind of left on a case of maybe you just don't talk to each other and we'll see what happens. And I think that I always say this is quite fun. I always think about the episode of The Simpsons where Homer's going to go on the date with Marge, and he does something to upset her, and then he thinks the way everything's going to be okay is just essentially to avoid Marge until the day of the prom, right? And I think it was a bit of that kind of scenario in the case of let's just avoid this and pretend it's not happened. But meanwhile, I was in the background just trying to figure out what on earth am I going to call this promotion, and it was just a case of trying to find a name which had a domain name available, basically. And revolutionprowrestling.com was about the only one which had a domain name available to purchase, and that's how we became Revolution Pro Wrestling. And when we first started, it was always like, oh, don't call it RevPro, like you always call it like RPW or whatever. But something just, I don't know, like just as time went on, like RevPro just stuck. And I remember when we first, the RevPro logo, the original logo. So I had support of everyone in the wrestling industry who knew my plight. So the original Revolution Pro Wrestling logo was made by Dave Sharp from 4FW. There were like people who were talking to, like Mark Sloan would talk to me about it. Like, so, like people within the industry knew what was going on. And all the roster, I smartened up the roster as I was, and then on the day we kind of, it was like, once we do this, once we take the genie out this bottle, there's no kind of turning back. And I think that was probably what you walked in on, because that was like, and it was almost like, how do I explain this? How do I describe this? And whatever have you. And that's where the first FWA influences came, because I think the next set of events after that were called Uprising. And we featured the UK retirement of Jerry Lynn. And I think that set the pace for the tone for what we were trying to achieve with RevPro, almost always respecting the history of professional wrestling whilst looking forward as well. And you think about, again, like, look, none of this would be possible without FWA, but I always think about like what I've achieved. And I think about FWA all the time. And I feel like FWA is this thing that we all talk about, and it dined off of essentially what 3 shows that you'll call, and a half empty show at Coventry Skydome, and then I look at what we've achieved with RevPro and how much is taken for granted, and it's like, even next week, when we're going to Crystal Palace, that was like, obviously that wasn't really FWA, it was SWAT, wasn't it, the Supreme Wrestling Alliance tour.
But when you watch that show, like they haven't put like plain turnbuckle pads or SWAT turnbuckle pads. It's still FWA branding. Yeah.
So like, as far as I was concerned, that was an FWA show. But again, think about how huge that was. And like, we're going there, we're doing 2 nights next week, and like, it's just another, like, well, it's not like shrugging it off. It's like, it's just
part, but it's important, but it's part of the routine now. It's it's just part of how RevPro rolls on every year.
That's it. And like, and it's almost, it's tough, because you look at all of that and you think like, where's all the, like all the stuff that we've achieved? And because, and I guess it's because I sit here from the position of someone who's seen British wrestling at its absolute worst, to creating pro wrestling at its best, right? and I have seen that journey, right? And because of that, I feel, we can take a step back and look at what we've achieved and all of that stuff, and just be very happy with it. But then I don't feel like we get that credit from people who are lucky enough to have essentially just been born into this, where it's just a given that RevPros at your call, that you can see New Japan stars all the time, that and again, it's a reflection of the world we're in today, because it's very much a now, and a what have you done for me lately scenario.
They weren't in the trenches, they don't know the struggles, etc.
Right. So it's interesting, because I do often wonder, despite everything that we achieved with RevPro, I do wonder, have we left as big a mark on the industry as FWA did? Because because FWA paved the way, but and I think, like, maybe years from now, are people going to look back on RevPro fondly like we did with FWA? But you just don't know, But already we've stood the test of time, and we've had longevity. And
So that's kind of my next question. As a man who's now been in the business for over 20 years, what do you think the key to longevity in British wrestling is? Thick skin, I guess, to start with.
man, you say that, I've not got very thick skin at the moment. The secret to longevity: how to take shit and keep coming back. Right? How to again, look, I always say, like, I said to you earlier about, if you speak your truth, then you don't have to worry about telling lies. Right? And I think that's the same as when you're producing something. Like, if you do everything with the purest intention, you'll be fine. Right? And that's and I always have to come back. I always use it as the reference point to my picture on Twitter as me as a child, playing with my toys, always follow your dreams or whatever. And I always have to think, would I, if I was younger and I told my younger self everything I've achieved, everything I'm working on, the people I've worked with, would I be happy? I would think I was the coolest adult on planet Earth, right? Everyone else thinks I'm a loser, but but that's it, like, just having that, almost that childhood innocence. Because I believe ultimately wrestling is very pure. And I know, like, I don't want to go off on another tangent, but like, it seems one of my specialities. Who knew I spent a lot of time in cars with Alex Shane, eh? But like, I think wrestling is very pure, right? And I think that everyone tries to see it. I don't know why, right? But everyone seems to try to see it for something more than it is. Right? So people are always looking for something to be offended by within it, or people are always looking to think beyond good versus evil and telling a story. And people never want to watch a story play out before their very eyes, because they want the conclusion to the story now instead of waiting till tomorrow. Right? And I feel like that is the saddest thing about modern wrestling fans. Not everyone, and look, I'm very aware that the internet, and I'm not slagging the internet off at all, right? Because without the internet, because that's one of the big things I learned from FWA as well, how to utilize the internet in order to kind of help your brand and help push your stuff, right? So, but I just feel like smaller voices are kind of amplified because of the internet, and because of human nature. It's so much easier to look at the negative rather than the positive. And I just think that, and as a result of that, like I always say, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So if you surround yourself with negativity, which is easy to do, right, then your view on wrestling will become jaded. Your view on, what you're producing will become jaded, and you'll become disillusioned. And the second you become disillusioned and you're not enjoying what you're doing, then you'll get out of it. Trust me, because I've said so many times that if I put this much effort into any other business, I'd probably be a millionaire right now. Right? But then I always have to come back to it and say, well, I can say that, and people can think I'm crazy for doing the hours I do and working out everything I have to work out. And, but the thing is, like, I wouldn't be able to put the same amount of effort into anything else because I don't have the passion for anything else like I do pro wrestling. So you have to keep that purity of it, that same love, that same innocence that we had when we were in FWA and we were doing stuff for free and wondering how have I just walked out and not been paid again? But man, I can't wait to go back.
I mean, it's enough to turn you off even watching wrestling as a hobby, let alone working in the business.
Right, absolutely.
Like any normal person, if they showed up to their job and didn't get paid, would be like, fuck all of this.
Right.
But for some reason, wrestling drags people back.
Yeah, because it's a love, it's a passion, and it's a hobby that, I've been lucky enough to be able to turn into a profession. It's a very, very modest living, and there's been times which have been very, very tough. But you have that motivation because you believe it. I don't know. It's just something I believe in. And again, have I got my own cult now? I don't know. But like, but
I don't know, mate, but I want to run through walls for you right now. I don't know why I'm gonna do that.
Look, and I'm not even trying. So, but the secret to longevity is coming from everything with passion, right? And
Sure.
I feel like, so Kieran, you can probably relate in the sense of you've got to think about your highest of high point with FWA, right? And that is that high that I'm constantly chasing with RevPro, but I'm not only constantly chasing it, I'm constantly experiencing it, right? Because I genuinely am. Like, even this past weekend, I've just come back from Berlin, right? Done 2 shows in Berlin. Crowds were fantastic. So much noise and energy. A roster that was so appreciative. Like, it's good team building being there as well. And it's all because of wrestling, and that's like just another high point, you know. So it's a dream. The whole thing's a dream, and I just have to keep thinking back to that same kid that was, just wanted to be close to wrestling, right? And this, it all ties back into FWA, because the mission statement from the start was to produce a product that I could take my friends and family to, that they would not be like, what on earth are you watching this for? Right now, for example, like my sister, she comes to so every time we do like a big RevPro show, she'll come along to the show. She'll bring her kids. Last year they came to the anniversary show at the Copper Box, and she bought like, I don't know, like maybe 4 of her friends, their kids. There was like maybe 12 of them all came to the show. And they loved it. Like, they were blown away by it, and like couldn't believe the level of what we'd done, right? And they each walked away with their favorites. Her daughter loved, the girls, which I thought was like just really nice. Like she's like some of the girls, like she's saying like Mercedes Blaze looked like her, I don't, is it a brat stole? Something like that. I don't know. I've not.
I can see that. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? She was instantly attracted to that. And I feel that, and then like that, some as her friends, I went to school with them, and they now think that I'm this big fucking deal that does these massive shows all the time. I just let them keep believing it. And like, because and that happens, and I'm just like, yes, I'm actually achieving what I'd set out to do. Like, so much so that my sister's always like, when's the next one that we can, bring the kids to? And and they're coming to the anniversary show next week, so they only come like, maybe once or twice a year, but they are the very definition of casual fans, in the sense of they don't watch wrestling at all outside of coming to a RevPro show, but they have such a good time. And I think they probably, like, she's got young twins, like she's got 4 kids. So like, she's at like, I think if it was just the 2 older ones, she'd probably bring them all the time. Right. And that's kind of what we want to be able to achieve, to be able to bring those, the casual fans to our shows. And I think that that's what FWA achieved. Maybe not to the same extent, like, because I feel like if you watch an FWA show, so I remember going back to the first time I saw Jack Xavier wrestle, I was like really taken back by it. Like, it really, because he was like a young looking fat lad that was flying around the ring, right?
Yeah.
And it was felt very surreal, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. Like,
I think part of Jack Xavier is, with his look, was like he could be one of us.
Yeah, he could be, but like
he was the wrestling fan who had become the wrestler.
Was it the Chunky Monkey he used to be
the Funky
called,
Chunky
right?
Monkey? Yeah,
Funky Chunky Monkey. But but I feel like, yeah, he could, but it only went so far. So I remember the big turning point for Jack Xavier, and this is another lesson I learned from FW as well, was British Uprising 2, when Jack Xavier beat Homicide, and that was the beginning of the end for Jack Xavier.
Yeah,
because it never should have happened, right? If he'd lost that match, he would have gained from that match. But instead, it almost destroyed him, because I don't think people saw him as being on that, that level.
And the stuff we're now watching is the rehab and the rebuild into the feud with Alex.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So, And he did the Last Man Standing with Hayes.
They did Last Man Standing, yeah.
But he's almost destroyed him overnight, and then had to come back to that. So I feel like, I feel like perhaps, look. So when I say this, I feel like for us wrestling fans, maybe fine to see Jack Xavier, and like you say, one of us, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like to an outsider that isn't into wrestling, is like, what's going on here, right? And
so to us, it's one of us has made it to the ring. To them, it's what is one of them doing in the ring.
Right? Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah. And I feel like the first time I saw Jack Xavier, I want to say was probably Wrestle Express, which wasn't even an FWA show, and so that's where it stood out even more, because you didn't have all the crowd going crazy for him. And like I say, a part of that was obviously the training schools going crazy, because they created that artificial atmosphere, but that artificial atmosphere obviously then bled through to everyone else. And it's because they were there. It's interesting, isn't it? Like, because there's a troublemaker in the top right hand corner of this chat who makes lots of chants at these shows.
They're all niche though, Andy. They're all too niche, apparently.
But no, I love it. But again, I think it's fair to say that when you're chanting, it's not at detriment to the show. It's the atmosphere of the show, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and there's often, and sometimes, look, every now and again you have a hit, but you have some misses. I've heard some.
Oh yeah. Who were it now? I think it was Gabriel Kidd at a RevPro show in Sheffield. He said, "You've not had a good chance in 4 years." And he's not wrong. Not wrong, Andy.
But when it hits, and you've got to try, right?
Yeah.
But those fans, they walked so the Ogdens could run. Do you know what I mean? Those fans. And they'd get the chants going, and it was obviously the first one was just FWA. That was a very simple chant, but you remember Sloane's a monkey, stuff like that.
Speed bump,
yeah, and just those were the chants that you could easily get behind and whatever. And then when everyone starts doing it, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, Mark Sloane must be the most charismatic heel in the.
Or just a monkey who's dressed like a speed bump. Yeah,
but it helped,
I've realised I've been asking all the questions and you've been doing all the answering. Andy and Eddie, is there anything else you want to ask?
Andy, do you want to?
No, not that comes to mind, mate.
All right, okay. If they've come up blank, other Andy, is there anything we've not hit on that you wanted to? You said you had another story, but we've tangented well away from that.
Look, so I guess kind of, I didn't know how this was going to go, if we were going to kind of look at a chronological order of my FWA life, but obviously as conversations do, which I think is better like this anyway, from one thing to another. But I remember, so obviously I spoke earlier about Alex always being like, you're too young, whatever. I think I'm not sure if I referenced this, but the reason why I actually was that the doors were opened for me to wind up refereeing properly and doing all the shows was because of Ricky Knight from WAW. He not Ricky Knight Jr., Ricky Knight Senior, granddad, right? He basically was just like, if you're good enough to referee, you're old enough to referee. And he was one of the, I think he'd describe himself as like a walking, talking heel, right? So he was like, and when I first worked with Ricky Knight, when I first started working with him, he was one of the first wrestlers to kind of, give it, and you'd have to ad-lib with him, And I think that Ricky enjoyed that, and he kind of, and Alex just really respected his opinion. And it was weird because I'd never seen Alex, I don't want to say second guess himself, but I want to say I'd never really seen Alex ask for advice from anyone and listen to it. But he listened to stuff from Ricky. And I remember we did like a Interfed Cup show in Bournemouth, I want to say. And on that show, Alex was asking Ricky, and Ricky was just like, yeah, he's a good referee. You want to have him. I'd have him, referee all my stuff. All my championship matches, I'd have him do, whatever. So from that point, Alex started to be a lot more open to me refereeing. And it's weird, right? Because I look at it and I'm just like, if I was in that position, I probably would have been the same as Alex, right?
Yeah.
But I think, but because of Alex's way of only really wanting, like I remember Fozzie always used to. Do you remember Fozzie used to have like a radio, like FWA radio or something?
Yeah, so I brought this up on when we talked to John Atkins. Like, Fozzie and John were basically podcasting before podcasts were a thing.
Right, and Fozzie always used to have a thing called Flavor of the Month on that podcast, or maybe Flavor of the Week, right? Because it was all tongue in cheek, but that was designed by Alex. Always had like a Flavor of the Week or a Flavor of the Month, right?
Yeah,
where he'd have his favorite, and that was the only person who could get any FaceTime with him and could get any conversation with him or whatever. And like, maybe I achieved that accolade one time, but like, I feel like I was always like an accessory to the Flavor of the Week. So, for example, JC Fonda would do a lot of driving for Alex,
right?
And I would just be in the car on those journeys, and JC Fonda would have been the Flavor of the Week, but I was kind of with the Flavor of the Week, so I was kind of getting that FaceTime and whatever have you. And I guess like it's weird because the way I'm saying it sounds weird, but we did all put Alex on that pedestal. But anyway, so Alex, I wound up on a train, like going, I don't even know where I'd been, but I was going home. Alex was getting on the train to Southend. He was going to the seafront with his then girlfriend at the time. And like, of all the trains in the world, we got on the same train at the same time. And it was a sea-to-sea line train. And like, we literally walked onto the carriage at the same time, and we were sat literally together. So it was the first time I had any time with Alex. We were there for like, an hour, talking as the train got to my stop or whatever. And he was going, "What else are you good at, Andy? What else can you do?" And like, I was just like, it feels like he really doesn't want me to be a referee here, right? And this was the week before the Brent Town Hall show. And he was like, "I'll tell you what, just bring your referee stuff to like," because again, like, I don't know, I'm not sure if this was exclusive to me, but I don't think I was ever actually booked for an FWA show. Right.
Yeah, people did just sort of turn up and end up doing jobs.
Well, I think even when I was refereeing, it was just assumed I'd be there.
Yeah.
Right? It was never like, "Can you be at this show?" And I do remember it. They're undoing one time. I know we've mentioned Jack Xavier a lot on this podcast, but they're like, "We were at the show. Where's Jack Xavier? He's not here. Why is he not here?"
Yes, I don't want to give too much away for two people who haven't seen this yet, but we're getting to that incident. Let's say within the next couple of months.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Where is he? He's on holiday. What?
Yeah.
He's got this match. Did you book him? No. Like, you're supposed to have read about it on the internet. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that was so that's what I want to say. I don't really feel like it was uncommon. Like, and I think there was times when I'd perhaps ask people like, "Oh, do you want me there?" or whatever. But I don't think I was ever once asked to be there. Right. But anyway, Alex was like, "This is the first time I was asked to be there." He was like, "Be at Brent Town Hall." So it was the first show they'd done at Brent Town Hall. Right. And he was like, "Be at Brent Town Hall, blah, blah, blah." So of course, I'm doing the ring crew there anyway. Getting my £25 to the ring crew, hoping to pick up some money refereeing. I'm the first person in the building. So very often, this is what people don't really realize about me. And I don't think anyone at the time even realized it either. I would, on most shows, be the first person in the building and the last person to leave. And I didn't drive. And I was young, right? So I turn up Brent Town Hall. I'm doing the ring. I'm all nervous, hoping that maybe I'll get a chance to referee. And in walks Jake the Snake Roberts, right? Who's not advertised. I don't think he was advertised to be on the show. He might have been.
No, so I also think this is the second Brent Town Hall show because, spoilers again, this ties into the Jack Xavier story.
Oh, okay, right. So this would have been the. Yes, you're right. Yeah, sorry, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It was the second one. Sorry, I was at the first one, and. Maybe I was like helping sell programs at the first one. That's what I mean. Like, I was never really, like, it wasn't, I was never really got my foot in the door until a bit later on, right? It was almost, I was there, I was ready to go, but then obviously I bumped into Alex, and Alex was like, he was like, "I like you, there's something about you, you're a good kid," and like, do you know what I mean, right? So I was, I was hoping I'd get this referee work, and like, I was obviously in at this stage because I had like the FWA referee kit, do you know what I mean? They'd given me a shirt and whatever. yeah, so Jake the Snake Roberts walks in, and he's got a water bottle in his hand, and he's like, and I don't even know what, like, it was just mental. Like, he just walks straight up to me, like all the, like, there's lots of people in this room, and he just walks straight up to me. He's like, "You're right, kid. What's your favorite color of water?" Right? And I'm looking at him like, "Are you?" And I remember I was stood in the ring, and I was putting the pad, because I always used to check the pads, but I was actually putting the buckle on, right, at this point. So like just setting up the ring, so like, you know, as you put the ropes on and put the pads on, and I stood in one of the corners of the ring, right. So he's asked me what my favorite color of water is. I'm just like looking at him, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, right? So this is real life Jake the Snake Roberts. And then he just looks at me and he holds up his water bottle and goes, "Mine's brown." And he holds up this water bottle and it's filled with whiskey, right? And I'm like, never meet your heroes, right? So that's why when Andy was drinking, that's why that kind of reminded me of that story. But then that story progresses, right? So they then say to me like, "Oh, we think we're going to have you as a reserve referee." Like, what the fuck is a reserve referee? It's like it's a nice way of saying thanks for coming, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, you're not getting paid, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like going to be a reserve referee. I think there was 2 pull aparts that I was going to be involved in, and obviously it's on FWA TV, so I'm like, I'll get my face on the telly, whatever, right? So but you have to understand, like, I'm just happy to be involved. I'm disappointed, but I'm happy to be involved, right? And then Jake fucking goes backstage and he sees Steve Linsky, right? And of course, there's all the stuff with Jake and Linsky, right? So then, this is where they put me through the motions. So then it's like, they're like, "Linsky, you're going to have to pack," like, because obviously there's the ring stealing episode, which wasn't FWA. I don't know if you've touched on it, but
that is a statement from a man who's clearly never listened to this podcast before.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's one of Eddie's favourite pieces of Brit Res lore.
Okay, so
I've got this quickly. Your podcast with your podcast
right.
where you interrogate him is great. It's wonderfully funny.
So I was going to ask about that, right? And again, a story leads to a sub story, but so we did that podcast. So at the time, I'd been watching the OJ Simpson. The People versus OJ, right? And like, just fantastic TV show. But I didn't know really much about OJ. Like the extent of my OJ knowledge was essentially the WrestleMania 12 car chase, right? That was it, right? So I was captivated by this OJ stuff, and then like once I'd watched that TV series, I was like just reading up on it, watching TV shows, and then I learned about his book, If I Did It, right?
Where "if" is in really tiny letters on the front.
Yes, and then when he's talking about it, it's like, well, I suppose if I was going to kill my wife, I would have done it. You know? And he just like, literally, it's a confession, right?
Yeah.
And we had Steve Linsky on our podcast, and the podcast was "If I Did It" by Steve Linsky, and basically we got a confession out of him, right? And like, me and Andy were like little school kids. I was giggling, like, again, but what I will say is that podcast. I'm giggling now, and I shouldn't be, but that podcast resulted in Andy receiving a death threat. I'm not even making it up, because obviously for us we can all laugh about it because we lost 25 quid on a ticket, or we lost a day of our lives, or we lost but for John it was like a big thing for him, right? And I get that, right?
Yeah.
And it felt, and I felt like really bad afterwards, but when we were all just sat in the room like little children, it was just like, and I was like, we're finally going to get this out, finally going to get this out of you. And all those years later, and then it still blew up afterwards, but obviously that was a kind of a private blow up. So then after that, Jake Roberts knows Linsky's there, and he's like, I'm not doing this show if Linsky's there, blah blah blah. So they're like, oh, Simon, you're gonna have to get. Oh, I've just broke kayfabe.
We know,
Okay.
don't worry.
So they're like, you're gonna have to go. You're gonna have to
Yeah.
go, right? So Linsky's like fucking packing all his bags and stuff. Then they pull me to one side and they say, Andy, you know you're the reserve referee. Can you referee tonight? And I'm like, right, I was so happy. I'm gonna referee, putting my stuff on, whatever. And then I don't know what happened. Jake went and had a conversation with Alex, which I think wound. Someone slapped. Like I don't know if Alex slapped Jake or Jake slapped Alex, but they had a heated conversation with one another.
Yeah.
They wound up hating each other, and then Jake got sent home.
Yes.
Right. And Jake the Snake got sent home, and rather than say like, "Well, Andy, you still referee one match," they were like, "Sorry, Andy, Linsky's going to referee again." Right. Took my referee stuff off. And I felt I was crushed, right? And then I just remember Sweet Soraya, Paige's mum, Julia. She was like going, I can't believe, like it was half ribbing but half serious, and she was like saying to Linsky like, I can't believe they've picked a referee over one of the boys, you know, like, and I'm just like sat there like, yeah, I'm with you, Julia. Right? And do you know what? To make matters worse, right, I'm the last person to leave Brent Town Hall, get to the train station, like literally the last person in the building. Everyone's gone, right? I literally waved John the ring van man off, walked to the train station, get the train, got the train to Stratford, so Wembley to Stratford, Jubilee line, I believe. Get to Stratford to get my train back to Southend. I've missed the last train, right? I made £25 on ring crew that day, nothing for the non-refereeing, right? And then I remember I was like, I do not, and bear in mind, no smartphones, no, nothing, no internet, no nothing, right? I'm walking the streets of Stratford, which is the second time FWA had me walking the streets, because I witnessed my first mugging after an FWA show, after Acton, Lights Camera Acton. There was me, Fozzie, there was Big Tall Jack, who's do you remember Jack Saunders?
The guy looked like a really tall dinosaur. He had like the spines down his head.
He still looks like a really tall dinosaur. But yeah, he's still around. He does like production for Progress.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and I saw him last year at Wembley Stadium. He did the ring crew for AEW, because it's like a loose link from FWA to Real Quality Wrestling, then Len to TNA, to then the guy that does the AEW did the TNA stuff, knows Jack from there, and that's kind of how it all linked together. So all coming back from FWA. We were all stranded in Acton after that Lights Camera Acton show, and that's where I witnessed my first mugging, and really realised what a horrible place this world was. So I opened my naive little 16-year-old eyes, you know. And then Big Tall Jack somehow managed to get us back to his house, and we stayed at his mum, picked us up from somewhere, and we got night buses, and it was on the night buses that I witnessed the muggings, right, outside on the street. Then we got night bus after night bus after night bus, and then we eventually got close enough for his mum to pick us up. Then we stayed on his floor, and I went back the next day. But anyway, so I'm walking around the streets after this Brent Town Hall show, absolutely devastated about what has transpired on this day, and I find like a mini cab place, and I'm able to get a taxi home, and it cost me £75 right to get a taxi home. And look, £75 in those days was even more, like a lot of money, you know. So it cost me £50 to have my heart broken on 2 separate occasions, and learn that one of my childhood heroes was a degenerate drunk.
All right, so let's try and wrap this up with maybe some happy thoughts. Like, what final thoughts do you have on the FWA, and what do you think the ultimate FWA legacy is?
I feel that the ultimate legacy is a positive one, because I think that it opened the door for for so many possibilities. It made you realize what really could be possible with professional wrestling. And to me, like, one of the things I'd always say is it was almost like you had the right people potentially at the wrong time. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean, I feel like the years it happened was obviously the right time because it obviously resonated during that time. But for example, you could look at yourself, Kieran, right? I think like you probably were the right person to lead the production stuff because obviously you had a passion for wrestling, but obviously the time in your life.
Yeah.
But as I've learned, like, it's almost like the only way FWA probably would have been able to get you was at that time in your life, right?
I think it's the same with a lot of people in the company. There was a lot of passion, but not quite enough experience.
Yes. And that's, I guess that's what I'm getting at, is like the right people, but the wrong time.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like I have a very creative mind for wrestling, if I don't mind saying so myself. And I feel like even towards the end, so say 2005, when I'd started booking for IPW at that time, and I'd kind of had proven a lot of my theories worked with professional wrestling, I feel like my mind could have been utilized more for FWA, but because of my age and I guess the perception within the company, because obviously I started as a kid and there's still that perception of, oh, it's just Andy, it's just the referee, it's just the kids. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like, even myself, I could have been a better asset to FWA later on if people were willing to listen, right?
Yeah.
And obviously I think that, with a bit more age, a bit more seniority, perhaps I could have helped as well. But then even like many of the wrestlers, you look at many of the wrestlers, they look like little kids, right? And
yeah, I mean, we looked at like Raj Ghosh was 17 at British Uprising.
was he
like
really?
Aviv Mayan in the stuff we're watching now, he's 19.
Yeah. And it's like, even like when you think about Aviv and you think about, I think Aviv was probably one of the most naturally gifted wrestlers that I've ever worked with. And when you think about what a heel he became in IPW, and obviously he put on size at that time, and but it's funny because when Aviv became better at wrestling, I say, like, he was always good at wrestling, but when he was less rigid and more loose and smooth and whatever, it's when he stopped caring. So, and I say, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. It's not like he didn't like wrestling anymore. It's like he didn't put the pressure on himself that this is do or die. But I think,
it's the difference between conscious and unconscious breathing, maybe.
Right, but I think FWA also put that innate pressure on everyone. And I hear people say that about my shows sometimes as well. And I always have to say to people, you just got to treat it like it's another show. But it's RevPro. No, it's just it's the same as what you're doing anywhere. That's what there's no ego.
The banner
involved.
is different.
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, and if I book someone, I'm not booking someone to do something different to what I've seen them do outside, right? And the ones that swim are the ones that are able to handle that pressure and just be themselves. So, like I say, with a lot of the talent, with a lot of the backstage helpers, just everything involved, I just feel it was that same group of people at a later time in their lives, it obviously would have benefited. But I do think everything has to start somewhere. And I think ultimately they should be seen as a promotion that paved the way for us and taught us what could be possible, what could be achieved. And it's almost like, if they can achieve this on a shoestring, imagine what you could achieve with a real budget.
Yeah.
Right. But for me with RevPro, that's exactly where I'm at to this day. Right. I'm like, if you look at the stuff that I've achieved, like I've run arena shows, right, where you should have a team of 20 people running the event and it's just me. So I feel like I'm very much in that mindset as well. And I feel like a lot of people look at RevPro and are just like, think we're some evil corporation, right?
Yeah.
There's, people spread rumors we're funded by AEW or we're funded by New Japan or
Chance
whatever
to be a
have
fire
you.
thing.
I wish,
Yeah.
like give me all the money, WWE, for example. WWE want to give me all the money, I'll take that as well, right? But it's just a case of, it has to be the right deal, right?
Yeah.
So I just feel like they showed us what was possible. In our training school, we always use the term "dare to dream," and I feel that that's what FWA did. They dared to dream, and then because they dared to dream, it makes you think maybe we can do this. Like, I would never ever have gone into York Hall if it wasn't for FWA.
Yeah.
Right.
I've said before, I owe my entire career to the British Uprising 2 music video. That has given me 20 years of being a professional editor.
I think with some of your videos as well, that's lasting memories of FWA as well. Just your videos combined with Ralph's music, just fantastic. I can only imagine how much time you spent on them, and
A lot.
and it's crazy, right? Because I feel like some of the videos that we're producing at the moment are some of the highest quality videos that we've produced with RevPro, right? But there's not a lot of time, so there's time goes into them, but not as much as I would like, because what happens is it's always on to the next show. So like FWA had the benefit of months between shows sometimes, right? Like I have 7 days between shows.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the toughest things for me, because I'd love to be able to replicate that. But, and FWA were like the first promotion they'd do actual like pre-show write-ups about the matches that you're going to see. And like just everything about it was just so ahead of its time. And it just had I feel like it just had so many visionaries involved. It had so many people, and again, that's why I feel it was so special, because it wasn't just Alex, it was all the people he'd been able to brainwash as well. So yeah. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, because like I said, like I love Alex, so I'm not gonna sit here and slag him off, because like I say, like I think a lot of us owe a lot of stuff to him, the same way he owes us a lot of money. And I'm joking again.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think both things can be true. I'm happy to say I owe Alex Shea my career. I'm also happy to slag him off.
One other story as well that I forgot to say.
Go on.
So this is after you'd left FWA, Kieran, right? So Barry was making the FWA TV shows at the time, right? And I was with Alex, going on to one of his many referee gigs to be the show stealer referee, where there were 2 people who I could call every single match, move for move, hold for hold, step by step, breath for breath. One of them was Alex, and one of them, go on, have a guess each. Go on, have a guess who the other person was.
Oh, man.
Johnny Storm?
No. But Johnny Storm used to call all his matches with like steps, dance moves and stuff.
Yes. Don't know. I want to say because you'd spent so much time with him, Andy Simmons.
No, because punch, kick, stalling suplex, running power slam isn't really.
Well, see, there you go. You know it. Bulldog stuff, right? That's all it is. You got any guesses, Andy?
Was Drew McDonald around?
Do you know what?
That's just punch kick.
Yeah. I don't think I ever refereed a Drew McDonald match. I've done some shows with him, but I never refereed a match of his, I don't think.
Yeah.
But no, it was actually Ultimo Dragon, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we obviously did all the NWE tours I was a referee for. Do the same match every night. And there was just a gag. Like he'd work M-Dog 20 most nights. And he'd be like, same. And then one night, on the last night, there was one guy who had come to... was 2 guys. Actually, one of them, I believe, was probably Angelico.
Right.
It was probably Angelico was working Ultimo Dragon. And the story of Angelico and NWE is hilarious, but that's, again, another story. But and Angelico's just been on this tour as, like, essentially a young boy who's not done anything. And it's the last day, and they, like, want to see what he can do and whatever, all right? And Ultimo Dragon, he sat there. So every night he says to Matt, I'd go up and ask, what's your finish? The answer's same, right? Every night M-Dog would walk up to him and he'd just go, same, right? Every night, it didn't matter. We do the same venue 2 nights in a row, same, right? always the same. So I could literally call the match like move for move, right? And if he changed opponents, the match stays the same, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, on the last day of the tour, this guy, like, I'd say it's Angelico working, and I think it's Angelico, but like, Angelico comes up to him, says, you know, what do you want to do? And Ultimo Dragon just kind of looks at him like he's a fucking idiot, right? And then he's like almost like he can't understand what he said. He's like, Matt, please. Sane. Tell. So then he got M-Dog to call the match to him, right? Because it's so predictable. So, and the Alex Shane match was very much like that as well.
Yeah.
But he had his match and he had his match down, right? But I actually think, again, you've been reviewing the TV shows. I've not obviously watched it back, but I always remember Alex to being a lot better wrestler than he gave himself credit for, right? And I think he had insecurities about his wrestling that led him to, when he found his winning formula, he just stuck to it, right?
Yeah.
I think he had size like no other wrestler in the UK. He had charisma like no other wrestler in the UK. And you can say, like, was it the cleanest wrestling? No, but was it good? Yes. Was he able to tell stories? Think about the match with Steve Corino. You know, was he able to tell stories?
It's good enough. It's like, it's John Cena, isn't it? Like,
Yes.
he's mechanically, he is good enough, and
Yes.
everything else like carries him on to being a star.
In today's day and age, he would have thrived, right? But I feel because of that insecurity, he was always doing. He'd want to stick to painting between the lines, and then he'd get a bee in his bonnet about, I want to prove I'm a good wrestler. So he'd build up a blood feud with Doug Williams, of which he, you know, did some great angles for, and then he'd get to the match and he'd be like, right, we have to start with chain wrestling. Why? It's because you want to prove you're a wrestler, but that's not. Do you know what I mean? He's working himself, right? But yeah. Anyway, we're driving to a show where I'm about to referee the same Alex Shane match I've refereed 100 times, and he's like, "Oh, before we go there," and it's JC Thunder driving. He's like, "Oh, before we go, we've got to meet Barry on the way, right?" And he's like, "Oh, I've got to drop off the tapes for for him to edit for the TV." And maybe he's got to give him some money to post them as well. Like, were they posted? I don't know. But he's like, I've got to give him like 20 quid to post or whatever, right? So we're already running really late, because whenever you'd go to an Alex show, like, you would make a meet somewhere and then you'd go to his house and pick him up from his house, and he wouldn't be ready. Finsbury Park, and then. So we're on the motorway. We're going to make a meet with Barry on the motorway, but not at a service station. Just pulls over onto the hard shoulder of a motorway, right? Fucking gets out the car, right? So he's out the car. Fucking police car comes behind us. Fucking blue lights, right? And like, JC's like shitting it, because obviously he's the driver, but Alex isn't the driver. So, and I wasn't a driver at the time, but I can respect a lot now that. Is points on your license if you're stopped on the hard shoulder without a reason, right? And police officer comes and speaks to Alex, who's like, you know, this big guy leaning into Barry's car, and we all know what Barry looks like. Do you know what I mean? Like, he could be like an absolute drug lord, you know, like he looks like a mafia boss, right? That's what I guess that's charming Don Childs, you know, like he's you know, the long hair, the beard, you know, Police officer comes up to him and he's like, what's going on here? And Alex, he's like, just turns around as only Alex comes. It's all right, mate. I'm just getting him some DV tapes. The police officer's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, what it is we run this TV show and he's going to edit it for me. I've got to drop these tapes off to him because he's got to be sent to the TV channel by, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like the truth, but it sounds like absolute bullshit.
Right, and Alex thinks he's going to be like, oh, you're a big the policeman's going to be, oh, you're a big TV star, whatever, don't do whatever you want. And the police officer's like, oh, it's actually an offence. It's like however many points on your licence and a fine to be pulled over on a hard shoulder without cause, right? And luckily, so there's a reason why that money was important. So Alex had this 20 quid or whatever. Or no, maybe it was more than 20 quid. Maybe it it could have been something along the lines of Alex just hadn't paid Barry for the previous lot of editing, and Barry wasn't going to do any more until he got his money. But Alex had some money for
we've all been
Barry.
there.
Alex had some money for Barry along with the DV tapes, right?
Yeah.
But fortunately, because Barry hadn't got any money, because he hadn't been paid, his petrol light was on, right? So his petrol light was red. And then Barry's like, oh, no, I just needed, it's not that. I really just needed to get this money off him because I've got no fuel and I was going to break down, right? Police officer looks at his petrol gauge. The petrol gauge is red. And he's just like, okay, be more responsible before you set off in the future.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that was it. Then on his way.
You see, the funny thing is, if that's Barry's Jeep, that always had an oil light flashing. Like, even if everything was perfect, all the lights on that dashboard were always going.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So yeah, it was his Jeep. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how we got there, but that's another thing that happened.
Yeah. I would like to thank you very much for your time today. You have been more than generous. RevPro's 13th anniversary weekender is coming up very soon, August 22nd and 23rd at London's Crystal Palace Arena. Before Eddie starts going on about fictional tournaments and legal issues, give us the full rundown on shows that are actually happening.
I'm intrigued about these fictional tournaments, but
no, it's okay, mate. I'm embarrassed now. I'm not doing it.
He's gonna have a right go at you guys when I go.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah, we have an actual real tournament ending. We've got the Great British Tag League ending at the Crystal Palace National Sports Centre, amongst other things next week. So it's our 13-year anniversary shows. Crystal Palace National Sports Centre. Night one of the anniversary shows is going to be Global Wars UK, which is going to be a combination. I think one of the key things that I've done, and again maybe it's a shout out to FWA as well, is develop relationships with international promotions. So we've got CMLL, New Japan, Ring of Honor. There'll probably be some more representation from other companies from around the world at the event as well. And that's happening on the Friday, and then on the Saturday, it's kind of, we made the decision that because we're always going to have like some international dream matches on the show, and RevPro was kind of across the years been synonymous for those international dream matches, but and I think you could be forgiven for believing that's all that RevPro is, but we do actually have real life storylines that you can follow very easily by looking at the YouTube. We do RevPro recaps after every show. Before every show now we have a video which is basically previously on RevPro, which will give you the, in 30 seconds to a minute and a half, it will give you some of the key things that you can expect to be seeing on the show. And we were going to just scatter those dream matches across the two shows, but we just made the decision, go with Global Wars UK on one of the nights, and then the second night we're going to have our essentially our storyline driven show, which just meant that on the road to the shows are over 2 days. Normally they're over one, and the argument was we could split the cards like they do WrestleMania, or we could just make it super strong. Right. And we've gone with a super strong option, and also with a mentality of, on the road to the anniversary shows, we didn't want to overcrowd those shows with everything is just story. Like everything's like overwhelming story, because we're trying to hit our points home hard. Right. And I just think that when there's too many stories going on, it's hard to follow. But being able to do it this way, we've got our handful of stories that we've been able to put into the Saturday night, and we've obviously got our show on the Friday night, which is the Global Wars. So it all works very well. It's all happening the same weekend as AEW Forbidden Door. What we're really trying to do with this weekend of wrestling is we're trying to turn it into an event, an annual event, that every single year, that bank holiday August weekend is a destination event for UK wrestling fans. And obviously AEW help us a lot by putting on the firework display at the end of that weekend, right? But I'd like to think that we play our part. And
I think you've built up a lot of goodwill by putting on two very good anniversary shows at the Copper Box like the past 2 years.
Right, and we would have
Like
been
some of the best stuff those whole weekends was on those shows.
Yeah, and that's our mentality as well. We go into those shows wanting to steal the weekend. We go into those shows wanting to have the headlines, and of course, we're not seen by as many people, but we see it as a shop window. We see it as an opportunity to introduce ourselves to new fans, and I think that's exactly what we plan to do this time round. Obviously, like I say, it's not as the shows we don't have the ability to get as many people in as a Copper Box. And I think some people might look at it and say, well, it's not in the Copper Box, so it's not going to be as big. But the reason we're doing 2 nights is to be able to give us the same, just economically, right?
Yeah.
Like to be able to do 2 nights, it just makes it more achievable to be able to deliver the caliber of card that we need to be able to deliver. So that's all happening. We hope that obviously people can be there in person. If you can't be there in person, it's all streaming live on RevProOnDemand.com, where obviously you can see our full back catalogue of events as well. It's quite an impressive list of events and names, and real body of work that we've been able to develop with RevPro. And I feel like right now it's kind of better value than ever because we run so many shows and every show airs live. Obviously we don't always get the results we want live with the all the varying internet connections around this country, but
it's a bit of an added bonus on top of the back catalogue, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And then obviously when the events don't when it doesn't work out, like either way, we put the full quality event up within 48 hours of the event taking place anyway. But we have seemingly started to be able to get it sorted. We've got some workarounds for if the internet isn't good in the buildings, which seem to be working, and hopefully we'll be able to keep that up. And the more, obviously it's the same as anything, isn't it? The more you do it, the better you get at it. We're slowly upgrading all elements of the production. I think if you look at the production now compared to what it was like even a year ago, you'll see huge differences. What I think is crazy, so this year, normally what I do, so obviously everything we do, we kind of reinvest, and people look at it and say, again, it's lessons from FWA, really, right? But people look at it and say, well, why aren't you using this and that, right? But the key is we don't want to rent stuff. I saw someone literally posted, this is a couple of years ago now, but someone posted a kit list of, this is what you should rent, right? These are the buildings that you run, and this is the local rental store you should go to, right? And I was like, it wasn't you, was it, Kira? No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't me. No.
But but they're like, these are the rental stores that you should go to, right? And I'm just like, yeah, but do some maths, right? If you rent these every single show and you look at how many shows we run, how do you think that's sustainable in any way, shape or form? It's really not.
Whereas if I buy them in 6-7 shows, they pay for themselves.
Right, that's it.
And I own them.
There you go, right? Yeah. But to buy them, so obviously we upgraded our cameras last, I don't know, it was after the last anniversary show. But I guess the point I'm getting at is that so after each anniversary show, we've kind of used it as an opportunity to take some extra finance that we've got because of the because of those shows, to reinvest it in production. But obviously we had to get free sets of cameras. We had to get free, just everything we buy, we have to buy multiples of, basically, right? Yeah. And we always do it after the big show, right? Because obviously that's where there's money. And then I'm and I'm thinking to myself, why are we do you know what I mean? Why do we keep doing this after the big show, right? So now I've made some investment before the big show. Hopefully it works and hopefully it all turns up on time. So we're hoping to get it for the weekend to just try and be able to test it out to make sure it works. Because sometimes, as I'm sure you know, with technology, you don't really want to try out new technology on your big event, right?
Always have a rehearsal.
But that's just an example of, we've spent a little bit of money to try and up our production a little bit further, which we plan on continuing to do so bit by bit, step by step. So hopefully, come the anniversary show, you'll be able to see, anyone who's watching at home will be able to see that on the live stream straight away. But again, it's a process. And I just hope people are patient with that process as we kind of continue to grow. And yeah, that's it really. Like I appreciate anyone who's kind of stuck with us this long. It's been a long old chat. And the crazy thing is, I don't even think we've scratched the surface of stories that I could tell.
No, that's the thing. Like, you know, even just by virtue of having been around so long, like, you know, you've got a million stories that you've probably forgotten.
Yeah, and well, I feel like that's one of those things. Like when I'm talking to you guys, it's making me remember things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we need to do more of that. I feel like, I don't know, like I always tell stories to our training. I think my trainees think half the stories I tell are made up because the world is so different now, and I'm so different now in terms of like, I think they just see me as like boring, you know, like boring and old. But
you don't end up like Uncle Albert, do you? Like during the war and
yeah, well, yeah, you know, it sometimes it was a war. Those days of the cockpit theatre and the electric ballroom, you know. So.
I'm sure we have plenty of room for sequels. But thank you again for coming to talk to us today.
And I look forward very much to the RevPro years once you finish the FWA years.
Oh, that's watching 13 years of a wrestling promotion.
I wonder what it would be called though. What would you call it?
Don't know. We'd have to have a brainstorm. I mean, this one obviously named itself quite easily.
Yeah, because my catchphrase is like, so I don't know.
We might call it "You Can Do Better Than That."
Maybe. Yeah.
All right, let's take this home. Eddie, what you got?
You can follow me at Eddie Sideburns on Blue Sky and the retired Twitter account. I do the gimmick where I pretend I own the 5-star wrestling because obviously they did that 1 million people turn or however long the tournament was. Where it was like, oh yeah, we're going to run this massive tournament. We're going to offer CM Punk £1 million. So that was a thing. But yeah, you can follow me on those. And Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for regaling us of these stories. Hashtag Team Cockpit for sure over Electric Ballroom.
Absolutely.
We don't like the cockpit
given how things have
anymore,
gone,
though.
yes.
Just we don't like the cockpit anymore because
Okay.
they're cowards.
No, Portchester Hall's where it's at.
That's right.
Yeah. And Mr. Ogden, give us the whole graps and claps.
Yeah, follow me on X at Occupy Free. Follow the podcast at GCP Podcast 1, where all the live reviews will be there at Forbidden Door weekend. Yeah.
Will the Ogden brothers be at Crystal Palace or?
Oh yeah, we're at Crystal Palace on the Saturday.
And what about the Friday, Andy?
Oh, we're at the Riot Cabaret. We just wanted a bit of a variety of each because we only see Riot Cabaret once a year. We see RevPro pretty much all year.
Right.
Sorry.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Let's not ruin this now. It's gone so well and so friendly.
Unbelievable. I've just poured my heart out to you. All right.
I can see your tickets not being refunded, but you not being allowed entry, Andy, after this.
Yeah.
Great to have your picture on the door.
Yeah.
So we'll have all the live reviews from there. You can also listen back to the back catalogue of Shy, Muck, and also mine and Kieran's current project of Orig Williams Wrestling in Reslow, 1991. So we've got another episode of that coming up.
I would also like to say a big thank you to Craig from RevPro for helping facilitate this, and to our own Andy Ogden for getting Craig drunk enough to agree to it in the first place. You can find everything to do with this show at linktr.ee/FWApod. We are on Twitter, Blue Sky and YouTube at FWApod and Instagram at FWA.pod. As for me personally, that's Kieran Edits on Blue Sky. Thank you very much for listening. Our next episode will be in 2 weeks, where we promise things will be back to normal, and there's 2 things you can do about it.
FWA.